streaming today, and we're thankful for their work on that. And then it will be YouTube, and be able to follow up if you want to refer that to somebody else along the way. We are privileged to be able to host this, but we're just a facility where it's at. We're thankful to the organization Faith in the Region Apologetics in Antioch County, a collection of individuals from several different churches that have gone together to bring in different speakers and to sponsor different events to help people grow in their relationship with Jesus and help them be able to understand and explain and articulate that to other folks in the culture we live. And so we're very thankful to everybody that's involved in that, and we're very grateful for that. Especially thankful for one of those individuals that I'll introduce in just a minute. Before I do that, I'd like to begin with a word of prayer. Will you bow your heads with me today? Father God, we thank you this morning for a beautiful late winter morning, reminding us that winter's not done. We're thankful, Lord, for the warmth that you provide, not only physically, but Father, the warmth of your Holy Spirit that we have. God, we're grateful for that. We invite your Holy Spirit to be with us as we share today. We pray your blessing on our speaker and, Father, and all those that are in attendance. Father, I pray that we might sense and feel your presence. And, Lord, may you continue to reveal and open and show yourself to us. And, Lord, in ways that we might be able to continue to share and reach out to others. Father, bless our time together. We ask it in Jesus' name. Amen. The individual that I want to introduce next is Dr. Bird. We're very grateful for Craig Bird, his influence in our community, and he loves Jesus and he loves people. And as I've said before, I'm thankful that I not only have him as my physician, but also as my friend. And Greg, I invite you to come and introduce our speaker today and say a word of thanks to you beforehand for helping to make today happen.
Hi. Good morning. It's so great to see you guys here today. A couple of housekeeping tips first. The first thing is today basically going to be 3 sessions, roughly 45 minutes, followed by about a 15-minute Q&A break time. Stretch your legs, decompress your bladder, decompress your mind, come back in for more. So then we have that, and then from 12 to 1:30, there will be a lunch break. And then in the afternoon, again, 3 more sessions, 45 minutes, probably 15-minute break. My one appeal to everybody here is that questions are a good thing. They're not a bad thing. There's nothing to be discouraged about. And if you guys have come with any questions, any burning doubts, concerns at all, please do not leave here until you have an answer. Mary Jo will be happy to answer them. I know Dr. George will be happy to answer, but please talk to somebody. Don't leave here with questions unanswered. Okay? Now, by way of opening introductions, raise your hand if you know what a worldview is. Okay, a lot of you. But for those of you who didn't raise your hand, a worldview is basically a lens through which we see and interpret and make an understanding of the world around us. It's like a set of bedrock beliefs that allow us to answer some basic questions that we all ask in our lives. Questions like, where do we come from? Why are we here? How do we know morality? How do we know right and wrong? Is there any meaning to our lives? And what happens when we die? Now, most of you know that there are many competing worldviews out there that give different answers to these questions. And I'm sure most of you probably know people who follow some different religious traditions or perhaps have no belief in God at all. So the question is, especially to you young people, as you become adults, as you go out in the world, you're going to encounter all of these different ideas about reality. And the question is, how do we know which, if any of them, are actually true? Well, one thing that sets Christianity apart, and for those of you who heard Craig Hayden speak here a few years ago, is that one of the things that distinguishes Christianity from these others is Christianity is testable. See, in the Bible, as opposed to other religious texts, things occur to real people in real time and in real place that we know exists. We know these places exist because archaeological digs have found a tremendous number of these places in the Bible. We know the time that these things occurred. For example, Luke places the birth of Jesus at a very specific time in history. And we know many of the travels of Paul when they occurred because they make references to certain rulers, and we know when they ruled. So we therefore know when Paul was there. So they're real places that happen in real time, and we know that they're real people because, again, archaeology has confirmed the existence of many of these people. In fact, the Bible places so much importance on the idea of being true that Paul writes in his first letter to Galatians that if Jesus was not literally raised from the dead, if this did not actually happen as a matter of fact, he tells people, you're wasting your time. Sleep in on Sunday morning. Don't bother to come because if Jesus wasn't raised from the dead, none of this is true. Which then leads to our next question. As they said, some of us with gray hair will remember this, the old Wendy's commercial, where's the beef? So the question is, where's the beef? Does Christianity have the beef? What is the evidence that Jesus actually did rise from the dead? How can there be a loving God with so much evil in the world? How do we deal with our doubts? We all ask these questions. Which leads me now to our speaker of the day, Mary Jo Sharp. And Mary Jo is going to help us answer these questions. Mary Jo is a native of the Pacific Northwest where she grew up with, frankly, little reason to believe in God. But ultimately, she became a follower of Christ, and she's going to share that story with us today. And eventually became a professor at Houston Baptist University, teaching on apologetics, which is the defense of Christianity, telling people why we can believe that it's true. Mary Jo currently travels across North America, helping Christians to defend the truth of Christianity, and she's engaged in formal debates with Muslims, comparing the claims of Islam to those of Christianity. Mary Jo is also an author of several books. Her most recent book, which was just released and is out there now, is Why I Still Believe, a former atheist's reckoning with the bad reputation Christians give a good God. Isn't that a great title? It's a great book, by the way. I've read it. I highly recommend it. So without further ado, let me get out of the way. Let Mary Jo take a seat. Mary Jo, take us away. Thank you.
So good to be in Virginia. I forgot how beautiful Virginia is. Living all the way across the country from you guys. It's gorgeous this morning. Well, if I could sum up my story in like one thought or one sentence, it would be a quote from Mahatma Gandhi. It's actually a misquote of Mahatma Gandhi, which is, I like your Christ, I do not like your Christians. Christians are so unlike your Christ. And it's a misquote because it's actually a quote from a friend of his family that's been attributed to him. And that quote goes like this, and I like this the way the friend of the family put it. He said, Jesus is ideal and wonderful. You Christians, you are not like him. See, I didn't grow up Christian, and ever since I became a Christian, I've struggled with this one area, the issue of the hypocrisy in the church. And, it's, as Greg was saying, I didn't grow up Christian, so I grew up in a part of the country where there wasn't this sort of a cultural Christianity. In fact, the area that I grew up in was very non-Christian. It's sort of a post-Christian feel to it. And so I didn't have Christianity, and I was an atheist. And when I talked to atheists about that, they said, well, I wasn't like a Bertrand Russell, Nietzsche, or even atheist. I was more of a cultural atheist, sort of a product of that area in which I grew up. And, I wasn't angry. I wasn't the kind of person that would be posting, vitriol online about Christians. I wasn't an angry atheist. I was just culturally atheist. But what I did grow up with was a great love of the beauty that was all around me. My dad was a huge lover of nature and the sciences, and so he took our whole family out camping up and down the West Coast. He actually taught me to greatly love the outdoors and to appreciate the beauty that was all around me. He was also a lover of the sciences. I actually feel like I can talk about this particular person he admired because I feel like you guys will know who this is. Carl Sagan. Some of you, if you're 40 and above, you might know who that was. He was an atheist science popularizer who my dad just loved everything, watched all of the Carl Sagan shows and read his books, and introduced me to that. So my dad loved cosmology. He loved to look out at the heavens and the stars and wonder about what was out in space. So not only did he teach me this appreciation of the beauty that was all around me in the Pacific Northwest that I was seeing, but he also taught me to wonder at what was out in the universe. Both my parents were lovers of the arts as well, so they took me to a lot of events, symphonies, concerts wherever we could, musical theater, museums. And so I started to appreciate also what humans could do, the goodness of what humans could produce through the arts and as well as through the science. And what this led to was, I believe this really profoundly impacted me to where I was the kind of person that wondered, what is all this beauty for? What is our pursuit of all these sciences for? What is the meaning of all this? I had a particularly good high school band program. And we played some amazing works of art when I was in high school. And I remember sitting in the middle of one of these beautiful performances thinking, but what is this for? It's extremely moving. But to what? What is it moving me towards? And I realized that I didn't have any answers for that. I didn't have any answers for meaning or purpose or value to my life or to the things that we endeavor to do. So I went looking. Well, actually, I didn't go looking for answers. Somebody came looking for me. My high school band director was extremely burdened for me. He was a Christian who had publicly shared his faith before. And he took a risk with me and said, Mary Jo, when you go off to college, you're going to have a lot of hard questions. I hope you'll turn to this. And he gave me an NIV one-year Bible. Well, apparently I didn't respond really well to him. He thought that I might actually turn him in or say hey, this, I don't know what I said. I think I said something like, oh, gee, thank you. But it wasn't a good response. And anyway, what he didn't know was that I was asking those kind of questions. I was searching for answers at that time to meaning, what is this all for? And he hit me at just the right time. So I began to read the Bible. And I began to see that it was very different from what I had expected it to be. In fact, I had grown up reading a lot of Greek mythology, and this didn't line out like that. This wasn't similar to that. It was very different, and it didn't appeal to it. So as I read it, I started to see that there was history in it. As Greg was mentioning, it seemed more biographical, like they were just reporting what had happened. Especially when I hit Luke. And throughout the day, you'll hear me bring up Luke a lot. So as I'm reading it, I'm thinking to myself, this sounds right. It's making sense of the things that I believe, like goodness and evil. It's making sense of my thoughts on justice and injustice. So I started to, when I went off to college, I sort of did the opposite thing of what people do, or what we expect our youth to do. Instead of going off to college and losing faith, I went off to college to explore it, because I hadn't had a Christian upbringing. So this was my first chance to really check out the claims of Christianity and check out churches in general. So I started looking around at churches and visiting them. And I eventually found one in which I heard a clear explanation of the gospel. And so at that point, things sort of come together for me, and I trusted Jesus for my salvation. But then I met the church. And she's not so ideal or wonderful. But I didn't know that. I didn't know that because coming into Christianity, I had no Christian background other than what I saw in the movies. So my thought was, if I was wondering all these things about the goodness, truth, and beauty I found in the world, then these would be the people who were all searching for the same thing. In fact, they would be best at it, and I'm super excited to get to meet them and to come into the church. And I was also super nervous because I went to school, I went to college in the South, I went to college in Oklahoma. So this was a very different culture from the Pacific Northwest. And as I said, the Pacific Northwest is sort of a more of a post-Christian feel. It was very postmodern. And so I'm going back to, I went to school in Oklahoma where it was very still Christian culture. And I went to a Southern Baptist church where they had a Southern evangelical culture about them. And it was very different. I wasn't used to it. I didn't know what to expect. So here I am the first time I walk into the church, and I'm a big ball of emotions. Like, what are people back home going to think when they find out that I became a Christian? And then what are these people going to think? Because I don't know this culture, and I don't know how to fit into. I don't know what they expect. Actually, I was such a big mess that I kind of, I wish that they had a disclaimer that first day that I attended church. I wish that they had a bulletin, they put some fine print, or maybe a sign out in front of the church that said something like, first-time church attendance, or just church attendance may cause extreme discomfort. Side effects of interaction with humans include, but are not limited to, and then you just put whatever in there. Like, for me, it was anger, disillusionment, distrust, doubt. These kind of things happen when you're interacting with humans. But like I said, I didn't know that. So I'm approaching my first day in the church as a new believer coming from a very different culture. And I'm worried over what to wear. I'm worried over all sorts of things. So I picked out of the 2 dresses I own as a poor college student, I picked the one I think is better. And I show up to church, and I'm walking into the sanctuary on my first day as a new believer. And the pastor's wife, the wife of the pastor who led me to the Lord, is standing at the entrance to the sanctuary, greeting everybody as they come in, smiling at everybody. And so I'm ready to give my big welcome to the church. And as I approach her, her smile drops, and she gives me the once-over. So guys, you don't really do this so much, but women kind of do this. We check each other's outfits out. I don't know why we do that, but we do. So she gives me the once-over up and down, and then the first words out of her mouth were, "Oh, honey, we need to find you better clothes." That's the first thing I was told as pastor's wife, as a brand new believer coming from a completely different culture, right, into this Southern evangelical culture that I knew nothing about. So that's why I wish there had been a disclaimer, like, yeah, humans, right? But for me, that caused me to distrust people in the church. And I think that's just the very beginning. It's not just that one instance I caused it. And I wish that was the only time I had something like that happen. But it wasn't. It was a pattern that I saw in the church of behaviors that started to cause distrust in me. In fact, my husband and I married a Southern Baptist boy from a small town in Oklahoma. There you are. I thought you were rolling around the back. He was born and raised in the church, and he felt called to ministry. And I was like, that was not part of the deal. We were supposed to be music educators, band directors. And then all of a sudden, after I married him, he's interested in going into ministry. So it was in the ministry where I saw these patterns of behaviors by the believers that caused in me some doubt. And it caused me to wonder, do the people who say they believe in God, do they actually believe what they're saying is true? Because they're professing the Bible as God's word, but what I'm reading in there and then what I'm seeing on a daily basis or a weekly basis in the church, like there's not really any matching up. I saw people who not only would they just, not only did they have vices, but they sort of wallowed around in their vices and made excuses for themselves. Pride, self-righteousness, I mean, those were nobody ever tried to improve upon their self-righteousness. Wow, I'm too self-righteous, I need to tone it down, right? I saw these kind of things in the church, and it caused me to say, hey, do you guys really believe this? Are you really trying to conform yourself to the image of Christ? Because I'm not seeing it. I'm not seeing it in the believers. I wasn't seeing it in the leaders. And it caused me that initial doubt. I'm not sure that anybody believes this is true. And then I started to reflect and say, well, why do I believe this is true? I don't know. I started to ask myself, how do you know God exists? How do you know that Jesus rose from the dead? How do you know that the Bible is trustworthy? Any of these things. And I realized I didn't have good answers to that. In fact, I realized that my answers would actually be no different from a Mormon. Like, I just know in my heart that I had an experience with God. And that may be true, but what makes me different than from a Mormon who could say that, or a Muslim who could say that? And I realized I had nothing else. As Greg was saying, Christianity is testable, and I hadn't done any of the testing of it to see if I believed this was true. So there was, at that time, there was not just doubt going on. So if you've been hearing what I've said so far, there was doubt in my life based in, like, what are the answers, like, we're going to look at during this time together. But there was also some pain and hurt from my church experience. And I didn't go into detail, I'll give you one example. But if you've ever been in ministry or worked in the church at all, you know there are instances that can cause you pain and suffering from being around other humans. So at this time, I believe there was not just doubt going on, I think there was a desire issue as well. And I'm not sure I desired for Christianity to be true. And that's a tough one, because I didn't know that at the time that I was doubting. I just thought, oh, I have these doubts, I can't answer them. What are the answers? But what caused those doubts was all that interaction with people that caused me pain. Right? So as a human, I can't just separate that out. I'm not just going to go into some mythological, objective laboratory experiment where I can just look at truth claims completely void of the pain and suffering that I've been caused in church. That doesn't exist. That's why I call it mythological. It's like this myth of our day that we just completely remove ourselves from our story and from our pain and from our experiences to just look at the objective facts of Christianity or atheism or whatever. That's not true. And I didn't know that at the time. Like, I didn't know that when I was going through my doubt, that it could be that I may not want this to be true anymore. Right? Even if I found it to be true, did I want to find it true? That's a big issue, because that desires are strong, and they play a big part of our search for truth. In fact, Francis Bacon, when he wrote the New Organon, he talked about back in the 1600s, he talked about the idols of the human mind. What keeps us from being able to discover truth? Your educational background, all sorts of things, but definitely your desires, your emotions are going to play a part. So back then, I don't think I knew that. As I reflected on that, I think there was a desire issue. And so part of me being in the ministry with my husband desired to find the truth so that my husband didn't have to lose his job, right? Because I don't know, an atheist wife for a pastor is probably not the best thing. I don't know, I'm just gonna guess not, especially in the culture in which we were in. And then there was another desire going on in me, which was, I hope I find it true, so I can shake my finger at the church for how anti-intellectual they've been. That's not a good desire either, is it? Right? And then there was that other desire of, wow, I'd really just like to go back to my former atheism, because I like those people better. They were nicer, and even though that was my childhood, so it's probably a skewed view of atheism, I was just like, yeah, those were nicer people. Nobody ever talked about my clothing. I could just hang out with people. They accepted me who I was. They weren't trying to change me. They weren't trying to change me, right? They were just like, wherever you're on your journey, that's great. So I had this idea that it would be liberating if I could just release myself from the church, and all my problems with this hypocrisy of humans would go away. So there are warring desires going on. And at that point, I had this memory that sort of like pricked my conscience about all this endeavor. And this memory was of when my daughter was born. So when she was born, I was getting ready to take her home. And I was coming out of the hospital doors. I think I was walking out. I still haven't settled that in my mind. I don't think I got wheelchaired out. I think I was walking out, but she was born in a Native American hospital. There's no frills. So I was walking out, and as I came out the doors, I walked into this big cloud of cigarette smoke right in front of the hospital main doors. And I'm holding my baby in my arm, and it's supposed to be this beautiful experience, right? That's what Hollywood tells us. It's supposed to be this amazingly beautiful experience, and we put her in the car, and I'm in this cloud of cigarette smoke. I'm like, where's that coming from? And I look off to the right, this group of doctors and nurses taking a smoke break out in front of the hospital. And my first thought is, Bunch of hypocrites. If I were to go into the office right now and see one of these guys, they would say smoking will kill you. Right? Absolutely, no question about it. You cancer, it'll kill you. Don't even start it, don't do it. And here they are, completely living in rebellion to the truth that they profess. Oh yeah, right? Christians do that too. Christians can adopt habits and lifestyle choices that go absolutely to rebellion to the truth that they profess. So what that memory taught me was that the hypocrisy of believers couldn't be the litmus test for the truth of Christianity. Right? Actually, the behaviors of any believers to any religious belief system or worldview couldn't be the litmus test. You have to figure out if that worldview is true. Right? So that's where I was at. I had to figure out what was actually true and what I believed about it. And like I said, that was really hard because of those warring desires within me. So I went looking for answers to, is Christianity true? And at this time, I didn't even know the word apologetics existed. I had no idea what apologetics was, and so I had a bit of a hard time trying to find answers to my questions, because my questions were more like, is God real? How do I know that this stuff is for real? Like, I didn't have formalized questions yet. I didn't even know where to begin looking. So I went to our church library, and thank goodness for those librarians. They had put together a little section that said, I mean, this was not a huge church, but we had a small library. They put together a little section that said theology. They said, that sounds right, because my husband was in seminary at the time. So I went and looked there, and I started, that's not quite what I'm looking for. They're all assuming Christianity is true, and then they're teaching you what it is. But right next door to them, these little sneaky librarians had a section called Apologetics. And so I started to pull books off of there, and I pulled Norm Geisler's Christian Apologetics. And I started to read that. At the time, I was a middle school band director and a high school assistant band director. So I was pulling 70-hour work weeks between marching band and my school. And so I'm opening up this book, and I'm reading through it, and I hit the word epistemology, and I hit the words, the antinomies of human reason. And I thought, oh, yeah, I'm not ready for this. So I took Norm Geisler's book, after trying to wade through the beginning of it, I took it back to the library, and I looked around, and I found Lee Strobel's The Case for Christ. So I picked that one up and brought it home, and I was like, okay, now we're in business, I can read this one. This is funny to me, because now my PhD is in epistemology. So, coming around full circle. But, so yeah, I picked up Lee Strobel's book and I started to read through it. But after, he was handling it in a way that was unexpected for me. It was the first book I read that I understood, apparently, where he was not treating Christianity as true and then teaching me about it, which is what I've gotten in my entire church experience. He was giving me reasons to believe it was true. Right? Well, why do we say this is true? And that was different. I hadn't read anybody who had actually said, I'm going to try to support this as actually true and tell you why I think this is the case. So I read that book, but then I thought to myself, and this is the way my mind works. My dad said I was pretty much born a lawyer, coming out arguing. I read his book, and then I thought, yes, but that's only one book. And he's a Christian, and he's giving me the Christian answers. So what are the rebuttals to those? So what are atheists saying in response to that? So then I began to find the debates that the people he had interviewed were doing. And I remember my very first debate I listened to was William Lane Craig versus Austin Dacey. So Austin Dacey's a physicist. And that first debate, I wasn't sure what I was going to find. I think I was still warring between my desires. And as that debate unfolded, there were two responses that happened. The first thing was the Christian debater was up first, and he laid out 5 arguments for God's existence I had never encountered in my entire Christian education. I didn't have a long history in the church. It's under a decade at this point. But I had never heard the cosmological argument or the argument from design, fine-tuning argument. I've never heard the moral law argument. argument. Never heard any of these. I'm like, these sound really good. Where have these been in my church experience? They actually don't just sound really good. They sound extremely convincing that there's a God. Okay, so then I'm like, all right, that's just the Christian. When the atheist debater got up, the response that I had, I was hoping first that his arguments would be sleeker, smarter, and sexier. So that I can say, there it is, right? And Christians have been just brainwashed to I fell into that too, but look at these arguments, they're so much better. Look at how far away they are and how good they are. That did not happen. In fact, when I listened to the atheist, I was really disappointed in the understanding of the Christian theology, first of all. And he had grown up Christian, but his understanding of Christian theology was not very well formed, not very robust. And then the kinds of answers he gave, which ultimately led to a we just don't know kind of answer. Whereas Dr. Craig was giving, well, here's what we can know deductively. Here's what we can know from what we already assume and what we've already studied. The physicist was more of a cynic than a skeptic, more of like, yeah, we just can't know. So that really shocked me, that there weren't any better arguments there, or better answers. So what happened was, that was just one debate, I'm like, okay, one debate, so keep going. So I kept listening to people, I kept following these arguments where they would go. And as I was doing that, I noticed that I started to hit these roadblocks to leaving Christianity. I started, the deeper I went into the arguments, the more roadblocks I hit to disbelief in God. So let me tell you what I mean by that. And we'll look at some of these today. Some of the roadblocks I hit were an objective reference point for goodness. Why do we believe in good? What is that? Where do you get grounding for something like that? I'm good. I'm just ethics, justice, injustice. Why do we go to war versus not? It covers so many things. How do you live a good life? So what's the good and how do we know it? And I kept hitting this brick wall. We need an objective reference point for that kind of concept. I hit a brick wall on the ground for trusting my own reasoning abilities. How do I know I can even trust my own thought life, or that my reasoning is going to get me truth? I hit a brick wall when I came to the nature of the origin of the universe. That's a big one. That was my dad's question. What's at the origin of the universe? I kept coming back to, it looks like it's the being of God, the kind of being we describe God to be. And then the evidence of the resurrection, that there's a lot of evidence surrounding the resurrection. So it looks like 2,000 years ago, there was a man that raised from the dead, and what do I do with that? And that man claimed to be God. These are the kinds of roadblocks that I hit to walking away. This is what I mean by the brick wall. But, and we're going to start, throughout the day, we're going to look at some of those arguments, but I want to share a little bit more about what apologetics has done, because apologetics wasn't just giving me arguments sort of to wave around at people, okay, or to say hey, look at how smart this argument is. That's not what it was doing. Actually, apologetics was changing my life, and I didn't know that. So I began to see how the apologetics arguments weren't just giving me belief, an understanding of who God is and an understanding of it being true, but I also began to see how these arguments affected my daily living. Each argument that I've encountered actually affects my view of the world. And then it affects my interactions with others. So I want to make sure that is very, very clear. Because some people over my time in apologetics have said this to me. Well, apologetics just teaches people to argue. I want you to hear what I'm saying. Apologetics affected my daily living and my daily interactions with others. So I'm going to give you some idea of what I mean by that. Okay? So we're going to look at the problem of evil in the third session today. We're going to look at how to encounter it in everyday conversation. But what did the problem of evil do for me? Well, as I studied the problem of evil, it taught me to very clearly see that people in the church are fallen human beings. fallen, and they will fail me in every way possible because they're human. Right? And we're all suffering under the weight of our own sin. Even when we've given it over to Jesus, we still engage in our vices. That's why we're in need of a Savior. So it taught me that the people in the church are going to be that way. That's what's going to happen in a church community. People are going to fail me. They're going to hurt me. And guess what? I'm going to do the same to others. So I'm not exempt from that. You know, humans' essential nature doesn't magically change because they do or do not believe in God. So even if I were to leave the church because of the hurt and pain or suffering that I experienced in the church, that's not going to change because I go to the atheist donate meeting society. They're going to have all the same problems because of the problem of evil. Because humans are the ones doing all this evil in the world. We're the ones that aren't doing the right thing. So that doesn't change. I started to realize that doesn't change whether I'm in the church or out of the church. But it also made me understand the Sermon on the Mount better. The problem of evil made the Sermon on the Mount come alive to me in ways that I've never considered before. Jesus taught in the Sermon on the Mount what to do in light of the existence of evil in a world that God has created. And you'll hear me reference Luke 6 a lot today. But Luke 6, he said, do good to those who aren't doing good to you. Right? What good is it if you only do good to the people who are doing good to you? And I thought, yeah, in the church, I've got to do good to people even when they aren't doing good back to me. I don't have to conform to the world's way of doing good only to those who do good to me. That's not how we live in redemption that Jesus brought. Okay, so we live in goodness in spite of those who hurt us, which allows us not to be controlled by the evil in the world, but to live in the freedom that God meant for us. The problem of evil lived out in my daily life, taught through the Sermon on the Mount. Okay, apologetics is not just intellectual drafting. Learning very deeply about the evil that's present in this world and why it's here, and what it is, taught me how to engage my fellow believers. Sometimes I'm a Lord of the Rings fan, and so it always makes it into everything. So if you haven't read it, if you haven't seen it, I'm sorry. But I say it's kind of like Gandalfing the situation. Right? Gandalf is this, well, he's called a wizard. He's not actually a wizard. That's just what the humans think he is. He's some kind of higher form of being. Not an angel, but not a human. And he's supposed to care for the earth, so he walks around the earth caring for people. But guess what? Everybody's going to fail him, and he knows it. But he still does what's right. So I always call it like Gandalfing the situation. Once you realize that everybody around you is going to fail you, you can kind of go like, all right, when they do what's right, yes, good job. You can be surprised and happy and woo-hoo. Instead of going like, yeah, this person did this. Can you believe this? You know, this person did, yeah, I can believe it because of the problem of evil. So that's one of the things, like the ways that our apologetics was changing my life is I'm starting to see people differently. I'm starting to see my life differently, and I'm starting to see the scriptures come alive in full color. Okay, so now I'm going to get really nerdy on this one, but I had a student at Summit Ministries. I teach at Summit Ministries in Colorado, and one of the students there asked me we do a porch chat where you just sit out on the porch and anybody can ask you anything. And one student said, well, what does the Kalam cosmological argument mean for your life? I was like, yes, I love you! So the Kalam cosmological argument, if you don't know it, this goes like this. Everything that begins to exist has a cause. The universe began to exist. Therefore, the universe has a cause. That's it. Okay? And then everybody argues about it. So, what does that look like? What does that premise mean? But so I said, okay, well, here's the thing. If the universe had a cause, right, and that cause, I told him, if that cause, I'm going to use the ontological argument here as well. If that cause is the greatest being in which I can conceive, so God. If it's God, and He's the God of Christianity, a personal God, well, that means for me that my life is not an accident. I'm not a cosmic orphan. Right? It means that I was created with intention. I was created with purpose. I'm not just randomly here. So the Kalam cosmological argument tells me that my life is purposeful, it's meaningful. Right? So this is what I'm talking about with these arguments. They help me understand things about my daily life, about who I am, about identity, about what it means to be human. And then the evidence for the resurrection, which we'll touch on in the second half today. You know, if Christ truly raised from the dead, if he really raised from the dead, right, then he's really reversing the consequence of human evil. The consequence of human evil is death, it's destruction. That's what Romans tells us. But here you have an example. You have an actual historical event of that being reversed, destruction of creation being reversed, and redemption being put back, life being returned and given back. And if that's true, then Jesus also brought real redemption, real forgiveness into the world. Things can change. You don't have to be stuck in your ways. You don't have to be stuck in your habits. You don't have to be stuck where you are in your vices. You can actually, through the power of Jesus, be redeemed and start redeeming your life now. He actually said, you know, if what he's doing, if he's really who he said he was, then the kingdom of God has been brought to you. It's come into the world. It's here now. So what does that mean for us? We're not just waiting for heaven. He brought it to us here, now, so we can start living that redemptiveness here and now in this life. So again, I don't have to treat people the way they're treating me, right? I can be a force for good. I can see redemption, even in situations where the other person isn't really wanting to reconcile or be acting redemptively. So I don't have to wallow in my vices and sins. And that sort of the evidence for the resurrection grounds that for me. So it's not just something nice that I say, and then I go off and I get, what kind of fast food do we have around here? McDonald's. Okay, so I go off to McDonald's and then I treat the lady who got my order wrong, I just start chewing her out, right? No, can't do that because Jesus rose from the dead. So I go there and my thought is, I wonder why she got my order wrong. I wonder if she's having a bad day. I wonder what I can do right now to help her have some fun and tease her about it so she lightens up a little bit. I wonder how I can redeem the situation. Because if Jesus really rose from the dead, and Christ is the Redeemer, and you're little Christ, you're little Christians, you're little Redeemers. So you can't do the big redemption, but you can do small things. And that's how the evidence for the resurrection started to affect my life. Is that I can redeem situations with people everywhere I go. So, where are we at? Okay. So apologetics changed my life. It wasn't just arguments I got that ended up answering my questions where I had doubt. It actually started changing who I was. And my family began to notice that as well. So I'll give you at least two ways that it changed my life. First was when I was deconstructing my faith. So as I was tearing apart my faith and pulling it back, saying, how do I know these things? Apologetics showed me that I actually believed Christianity was true. So that I couldn't walk away from it. Okay, so I couldn't honestly return to my former atheism. That was one thing that apologetics did. Secondly, the arguments I learned began to work on my soul. It began to change me. It was slowly. I didn't even notice. Like my daughter noticed. She said at one point, after I'd been at Viola for, I think it was maybe a little bit longer than a semester, she had told me that I wasn't petty anymore. I don't know if she would have done that. She was like 12, 13, somewhere in there. And she said, yeah, I used to get in trouble for all these things that were really ridiculous. Like you used to get mad at me for all sorts of stuff. And she said, you haven't done that. You're not petty anymore. There's the resurrection working on my interaction with my own child. And I didn't even know it. I didn't even know I was now holding myself more accountable for how my daily interactions were going, even in my family. So I was taking seriously now to become more Christ-like. Right? That was now like, that's something that we have to do. That's something I have to do. So I started to realize there's a way things should be, and that Jesus brought it to me. The way things should be, he actually brought that to me through his death and resurrection. So in a post-resurrection world, that I have a redemptive force in my life that can work for good, even miraculously. So Jesus' resurrection was a reversal of my own wreckage and restoration of his truth and immense goodness in my life. So if Christianity is true, those who trust in Jesus for salvation have access to that redemptive force, that redemptive power through the gift of the Holy Spirit. So we can be workers of incredible goodness and restoration despite the fact that we're going to fail. And we will all fail. This is hope. Right? This is actual hope. And it's one of the reasons I still believe. Thank you, guys.
If anybody has any questions, you can stand up and ask them. Otherwise, we can take a quick break. When you go and answer. If you're not the kind of person who likes to ask questions in public, you can come up and talk to her. But if anybody has any questions, take them now. Otherwise, you guys can quick break for a second. Oh, got a question?
Yes, ma'am.
How did your, and you may go into this later, but how did your family, your mother, your father, the ones that were atheists that you were raised, the people that you were raised with, how did they take your faith?
Okay, so we're still live streaming, right? I'll talk to you about that one. Thank you. Unless you want to cut the live stream, and then I'll fix it. Yeah.
Your statement about Luke 9, it shot me right in the heart. Because I've read it a million times, but never heard it in the context of my life right now. And I'm dealing with somebody that I don't like. I don't want to like, but I know that I need to. Can you give me some encouragement there applying that scripture, because I'm going to take that on.
Okay, so I'm going to repeat it for the live stream. The question is it's Luke 6.
Oh,
That's all right. No, the question is Luke 6 and dealing with people who you don't necessarily like. And how you, just some encouragement for handling situations in which you're with people that are difficult. So for me, there's so many, there's no one size fits all because it's individualized to each individual situation that you're dealing with. So I can tell you some of the ways that I do things, and then you can maybe glean from some of those. So on the positive side is sometimes when somebody's being ridiculous with me, or they're not somebody I would typically like. Let's start with being ridiculous. I just don't return them. And it gets awkward because like I've had situations where after church, my husband was a worship pastor, now he's an associate. But where we would come out of the worship service and somebody would be like, oh, the pastor, blah, 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 blah. And I just not talk.
Right. Yeah.
Because I perceived it as gossip in that instance. So I didn't. I made it uncomfortable for that other person to be like that. So that's one of the ways I handle it. I wasn't being rude. It's just like, hey, what are we doing here? I've had another instance where somebody said something negative about their husband to me, and I said, okay, so now that you said like something you can work on, what's something that's really awesome about him? Because my husband and I have a pact not to talk badly about each other in public because it's not lifting each other up, it's not redemptive. So we do that with other people. All right, people I don't like. I just can't marginalize them. I can't isolate them. I can't dehumanize them.
When you said because of the section.
Yeah.
I couldn't argue with that at all.
I mean, I'm going to hang out with them that, we're not going to go out to movies together, but I'm also not going to treat them poorly, right? So I just have to make sure that I'm good with God on how I'm treating any given individual. He doesn't expect us to be friends with everybody, right? The command is to love your enemies and do good to those who persecute you. And then he goes on and says, like, what good is it if you do good only to those who do good to you? Even the sinners do that. So my role is to do good to them. I have to work out what that means with somebody I don't necessarily like. And I don't have like a fixed solve for that. Then there are people who have done things to me and they are unrepentant. They do not care. They feel that they're in the right and horribly marginalize me or a family member or whatever. And I've gone to them, and then I've gone to them, I try to do the biblical pattern, and I'm speaking to them, and then bring somebody else along, and then that didn't work. I call it, this is not the best word, so don't take this word as like, that's the word. I call it quarantining. Till such a time as you're no longer contagious. It's gonna leave you right there, okay? Because I don't want that to spread. So, and if I keep interacting with this, it's gonna spread. I'm gonna start getting bitter and angry. So I'm just going to, we're gonna talk, if you don't want to have a reconciliation, I can't force you. You got a free will. So I gotta be okay with that. There's another Gandalf thing. Like, all right, great. That's not, I took care of situations publicly. If there was public alignment, I said, hey, that can't go on. That needs to be handled. But it may not end in a reconciliation, and you know what? That's okay. That is absolutely okay. You see that in the Bible with parting ways. It's John, Mark, and Paul, right? Parting ways, but they still do ministry, so it's all right. So there's a spectrum, and I'm still trying to figure that out. I'm only 45, so I don't have, in the view of eternity, I'm kind of I'm a baby. So I'm still working through my relationship with other people. Yeah. I just call myself a baby. I don't think y'all realize, we're eternal beings. We're all very young. all of us, everybody in here. Any other questions before we go into the break?
Take 5 minutes and stretch legs and bathrooms in the back, refreshments, and be back in about 5 minutes and we start again.
And
How are you? Nice to see you.
Hi, Howard. Do what?
I didn't know who it was.
Oh, is that right?
Snuck in behind.
We used to do about stuff, right? How you doing? I'm doing well.
And I would stand.
How you doing? You too.
Wherever they are.
I'll see you in a little bit. How you doing?
Supposedly. I'm going to be in yeah, exactly. Yeah, I just have
Oh, yeah. Right.
Yeah, I know.
get started with the next session. So if you can find your seats, if you could.
All right, so picking up from that last session, just quick recap in that, as a reminder, I grew up in church. Background was in atheism, non-religious. I became a Christian in college, and that was a very emotionally messy time for me. And like I talk about in my book, there were a lot of experiences that happened in the church that caused me to doubt my faith. So that was going on. And ultimately, I wondered how people who profess what I read in the Bible could go completely against its teaching or even do exactly what the Bible said they should not do. So all of that to say that my relationship with the church has been tumultuous. It's been rocky over the years. And so with Christianity as well, because of that doubt. The tension of what drew me to faith and what I found in the church really threw me. Okay, that tension between what drew me, the beauty, truth, and goodness that was drawing me to Christ, and then what I found in the church, the hypocrisy and judgmentalism. It kind of threw me, and I had to work through the reasons for why I stayed when others were letting go. Because that's what occurred lately. If you've been paying attention, there's deconversion stories that are hitting the airwaves and hitting hard recently. Airwaves. I'm dating myself right there. I'm going to consider the podcasts the airwaves. So we've got several high-profile Christians that have shared their deconversion stories, the latest being Rhett and Link, who are evangelical Christian, even youth pastors. I think they even worked with Crew or Campus Crusade. Okay. So before we get into some of the apologetics arguments, the first thing that I want to deal with, which I think is fundamental into any search for truth, is dealing with the idea of deconversion and doubt. And and I'm going to do it from my own perspective. So I'm not going to do like a blanket statement that everybody deals with this, but I'm going to let you in a little bit on mine because I struggled on my journey because I struggled with that desire factor, and I struggled with did I even want this to be true? So one of the things that helped me was recognizing attitudes that can change our perspective on doubt and leaving the faith. So we're going to look at 3 attitudes today in this journey of doubting what we believe. And so the attitudes that we can hold are being skeptical, being realistic, and being hopeful. Okay, so before you launch yourself in a whole bunch of study on apologetics arguments, there's some attitudes that go with it, and I'm going to explore these 3. So the first one is to be skeptical. There's an academic author, Daniel Taylor, and I love his work. I love what he writes. He wrote a book called The Skeptical Believer, Telling Stories to Your Inner Atheist. I love that title. That's great. The Skeptical Believer, Telling Stories to Your Inner Atheist. And he emphasizes in the book that being skeptical is in one way quite a blessing, because the skeptic isn't just going to believe what anyone tells them. And that's actually wise, right? So contrasting all of the sort of propaganda that we hear from the new atheists, that Christians are unintelligent, they don't think through things. If we go to the scripture, we're actually told to think through things. We're actually told to do that. So Proverbs 18:17. Proverbs is amazing. We're just getting smacked around on telling you that you need to grow in your knowledge and learning, because it's all through it. But Proverbs 18:17, the one who states his case first seems right until the other comes and examines him. Right? You need to hear both sides of the story, says the Bible. This is the wisdom literature of the scripture. Paul, we are not meant to remain as children. And I'm going to read from the J.B. Phillips translation of Ephesians 4:14. We are not meant to remain as children at the mercy of every chance wind of teaching and the jockeying of men who are expert in the craft presentation of lies. Right? So that's kind of a fancy way of saying you need to not get blown around by everything you hear by people who are really good public speakers. Okay? You need to take into consideration that they are really good public speakers. Like I'm a good public speaker. Well, at times. When I've had enough coffee. But you need to take into account what they're saying and say, wow, they're good at presenting that. So I need to be checking out what they say. Is that true? And in fact, the Apostle Paul tells you to do that. The Apostle Paul in 1 Corinthians 5:21, he's talking about the teaching in the church specifically. There are people giving prophecies in the church. And he tells us to test everything and hold on to the good. Right? He doesn't say just blindly believe whatever your pastor tells you. Test everything you hear, hold on to the good. This is the teaching of the Bible. What? You would think that didn't even exist if you were to listen to the popular media about Christianity. Like the old scriptures tell them to test the things they're hearing in church and hold on to what's good. So what a proper skepticism does for a person is that it grows you into a more mature believer. It can flourish you into, or it helps you flourish as a believer. But the problem is, what does proper skepticism look like? That's a tough one. Well, there's not a one-size-fits-all, but there are some clues to what proper skepticism looks like from the scripture. And that is that passage from Paul. It's one of the places in 1 Thessalonians 5:21, to test everything and hold on to the good. In fact, Paul, what I love about him, he's so honest. He's so raw. He doesn't even excuse himself from this teaching. If you read Acts 17, and you see what Luke reports that when Paul was preaching to the Bereans, Paul noted that the Bereans were of more noble character because they went out and checked what Paul said to see if it was true. Right? So he doesn't even excuse himself from this. I love that. I love that. So that's a good place to start. A proper skepticism, that helps us mature is checking the things out that we hear and that we are taught. So let me give you two quick thoughts here. Skepticism is usually given in a negative connotation. So when I say skeptic, the first thing that probably goes through a lot of minds is, oh, well, that's opposed to being faithful. Okay, that's not the case. That's a false dichotomy. And I think maybe that's part of that is because atheists tend to view themselves and label themselves as skeptics. Right? And Christians will say, we're the faithful. So we've created this sort of sense in our language of this false dichotomy. But you can be a skeptical believer. And if you are, you would relate to several people in the Bible, not many. I'll give you a few examples. You'd be relating to Joseph, Mary, the mother of Jesus' husband. Remember when Joseph found out that Mary was pregnant, he didn't go, woohoo! Yes! Immaculate conception. What did he do? He said he knows that's not how women get pregnant. Right? That's not how women get pregnant. Women get pregnant through sleeping with men. So he's skeptical. And it takes the intervention of an angel, it takes a miraculous thing to happen for him to get to the point where he'll believe it. Joseph is skeptical. He's not just willy-nilly, whatever you say. Okay? He's a skeptical person. He's not the only one. John the Baptist. I love this about John the Baptist, by the way. Because here is the prophesied messenger of the Messiah. This guy was prophesied about in the Bible. He shows up on the scene. And what's his message? His whole life is dedicated to proclaiming Jesus as the Messiah. Right? Then when Herod, you can read this in Luke 7, when Herod arrests John the Baptist and throws him in jail, and John the Baptist's disciples are out and they're seeing all the stuff that Jesus is doing, they're coming back and they're talking to John the Baptist and saying, hey, Jesus is healing these people, he's brought a guy back from the dead, he's doing all this amazing stuff. John the Baptist is he has a question. Well, he doesn't say this, but this is what the commentaries say. He's in jail, so it's not looking real good for him. If Jesus is doing all this amazing stuff, well, why is he in jail? And spoiler alert, he dies there. Right? He gets his head cut off. So he knows it's not going well, he's suffering. He sends his disciples to Jesus, and they have to ask him a question. And this is what I love right here. They're to ask Jesus, are you the Messiah, or should we look for another? That is the prophesied messenger of the Messiah saying, excuse me, Jesus, are you the Messiah? Because I'm saying you are, so are you the Messiah, or do I need to look for someone else? Because I'm giving my life to this. So you've got a skeptical believer in John the Baptist right there. He's checking it out. Is this true? How do I know it's true? And then you have Thomas. And we all love Thomas. He gets the label Doubting Thomas. Poor Thomas. But he said, after Jesus showed him who he was, he says, my Lord and my God. Right? He makes that claim that Jesus is the Christ. He's the Lord. He's God. Right? So you've got skeptical believers throughout the Bible. For some reason, in my own life, in my own experience in church, I was not taught that this was okay. And I don't know where it comes from. Probably things that people say or the way things are taught, I'm not sure. But I was always taught it wasn't okay. If you just had more faith, then things would work out. And I've heard that from other believers a lot. When they had a doubt, somebody said, well, you just don't have enough faith. That is the wrong answer. They may not have enough faith, sure. But if they're asking you, how do I know Jesus rose from the dead, and you say, well, you just need more faith, that is an incorrect response to that question. Right? So, anyway, you're a skeptical believer, that you're in good company. Another thing to note about skepticism is what I call analysis paralysis. That would be me. I overanalyze everything. I can't even pick out a dishcloth without figuring out if this is the best quality dishcloth for the least amount of money, and researching it and researching it and researching it until I'm sure that that is the best dishcloth. So sometimes I get analysis paralysis and I won't commit to something because I don't have that final answer. Is it the best? Is it this? Am I certain? So sometimes we can be so caught up in wanting to do what's right or to be right, especially when the stakes are as high as our fundamental beliefs, that we'll go on endlessly questioning rather than making an actual commitment to something, especially if it's something that can be shown up as being wrong. This type of perfectionism, which is the one I suffer from, can negatively affect our relationship with our faith and with people in the church in general. So you can have analysis paralysis. You can just, it's never good enough. And we'll hit that again on the cynic, when we get to the cynic. But another issue is that the skeptic can become, oh, here we are with the cynic. Another issue is that the skeptic can become the cynic. So skepticism is good. Cynicism, that's not good. And you can become the cynic by moving away from questioning beliefs, where you just simply have questions like, hey, Jesus, are you the one who's to come? Moving away from beliefs and arguments into questioning motives behind beliefs. And not just like good questioning of motives, to where you're always saying things like, you move from this argument causes me some trouble to, what foul motive do these people have for propagating this argument? If you're always thinking that, well, there's got to be something behind that. What's the motive behind it? What's behind that? You've moved into an area of skepticism, or cynicism, okay? This is the kind of person who will continually ask questions. When you answer them, they'll ask another question, and another, and another, and another, and another, and there's no end in sight. That's cynicism. When you're not willing to commit to anything, you just hover around in the land of questions. It becomes problematic because it's unlivable. Cynicism is unlivable. It's unlivable to question everyone's motives and everything, because you cannot know, for one, you cannot know the minds of other human beings. So questioning their motives becomes problematic. You need to deal with their arguments. They may have an ill motive but have a right argument. What do you do with that? We've seen that before. So you need to actually engage with the arguments to point where you're willing to commit to things and say, that looks right. Taylor's, our author that I mentioned earlier, Daniel Taylor, suggests a check on skepticism. How do you keep from becoming cynical? He says, be as skeptical about skepticism as skepticism is about everything else. Okay. Dallas Willard, the Christian philosopher, he put it this way. Not only should you, I'm going to have to pause and think before I say it, not only should you doubt your beliefs and believe your doubts, but you should also doubt your doubts and believe your beliefs. But see, we live in a culture that tells us that the only smart people are those who doubt everything. Unfortunately, that sort of skepticism is actually cynicism. And our culture's not telling us that there's actually a difference between the two. Skepticism, fine, ask questions, ask a lot of questions, but be willing to find some answers. So here's sort of where we go with this. If you are considered a skeptic, to avoid crashing into cynicism, then consider what good answers to your questions would look like. Consider what those answers would look like. So if all you're going to accept is certainty, then there's no possibility of being wrong, then as Taylor says, you are not being honest about the human condition. If you I have to read this to you, so I love the way he says this. If you refuse to commit to anything until all of your questions are answered, then you will commit to nothing of value. And he puts in parentheses, and you shouldn't get married or have children. And he says, because nothing of value is secure. To the contrary, Taylor comments, a good answer will call me to something higher, something better, and perhaps something more difficult. It will call me to change. So I'm moving forward so you can have this closely. We're done. There you go. It will likely call me to change. Now, I'm going to tell you that this kind of self-reflection on am I engaged in skepticism, am I engaged in cynicism, is extremely difficult to work through. Like, I don't know many people that when they're having doubt, I didn't do this, that go, I wonder where this is leading. I wonder what my motives are for asking these questions. I wonder if I'm just having some doubt or if I'm spiraling into the land of cynicism. That's pretty mature self-reflection, and I don't frequently find that, which is why we're talking about it today. Because a lot of times we'll give apologetic arguments, and I'll find people that's like, that's unconvincing. That's not convincing to me. And I'm like, well, have you ever thought about what is convincing to you? What does it take to convince you something's true? And most of the time, they don't have an answer for that. Most of the time. So a good answer, what a good answer will call you to do is likely change your mind or mature you in an area. A lot of times that's going to be a difficult thing. It's easy to remain a doer. Remember how I wanted to go back to my former atheism. Why? Because Christianity was hard. It was hard being in a community of humans, being responsible and accountable to them, especially when I saw the pain and suffering they caused me. What was easier was to just leave it. I don't need this. It would be hard for me to stay and grow and mature and work all of this out in a Christian community. That's tough. You gotta find those fine lines of what's skepticism, what's cynicism, what's a good answer, what's a bad answer. And then you gotta do all that in this community where some people are telling you, apologetics, that's just fake news. You just need to have more faith. You have to do all that within that community. That's tough stuff to do. So that's why I do this, like this section. We need to be skeptical but not cynical. And as I had to work through this, as I was thinking about walking away, I had to wonder, is it because I've been hurt? So I just want to relieve myself of the pain and suffering that I'm experiencing. Is that why I'm hoping atheism is true? Or am I actually finding atheism to better explain the universe in which I live? What's going on? I began to understand that my intellectual questioning wasn't just unanswered questions, but that there was an anger back there and the desire was involved. So I didn't want to have wasted so much of my life with people that hurt me. So I had to figure out, what do I believe is true, like I said earlier. You know, at first blush, cynicism seems like a good place for people. You should always question everything, it's all constantly, right? The problem, there's a couple of problems, is that the cynic never lands anywhere. They just sort of hover over commitments. Not just beliefs, but also relationships. Don't get too close, don't get too far, right? Beliefs, don't commit to things, but don't not commit to things. The cynic is just like hovering, holding himself just far enough away to get really involved and just close enough to never really leave. They're always keeping their options open. And what at first blush might seem very liberating on cynicism, it actually ends up as enslavement to very lonely and frustrated position. Another author I encountered describes this sort of cynicism as worshiping the God of open options. So here for me, cynicism would have set me up for closed-mindedness. People don't think that. They think they're being open by constantly questioning and never having any responses. But I think it sets me up for closed-mindedness because if I have to question everything at all times, I can never be open to considering something is true. Something that might change my belief or my worldview. And again, going back to the scripture for this, I don't know that a lot of new atheists encounter this, but Jesus performed great miracles in the Bible. He forgave sins and claimed to be the Messiah. He claimed to be the one seated at the right hand of God. And yet, what happened? People walked away not believing in him. So, a couple of passages of scripture, Luke 22:67. When Jesus was asked by the religious leaders to tell us who you are, he said, even if I tell you, you will not believe. And then John 12:37, that says that though he, Jesus, had done so many signs before them, they still did not believe. I remember Carl Sagan said, why doesn't God just put a glowing cross of stars in the sky so we know he's there? He came to earth and he healed people. He brought people back from the dead. And what did people do? They walked away. Right? So the show me the money argument doesn't work. Because he did show up. And people walk away. So skepticism, not cynicism. That's one of the attitudes we can take in our journey. The next one is be realistic. Okay, so in my experience, I brought into the church a set of expectations with me. I really did. I brought in this sort of naive idealism about what the church is going to be. I had initially been drawn to the church because of the great beauty and goodness I found in creation, and then and also in the scriptures. So I'm going to give you a couple of the scriptures here. All right. So like in John 13:34 through 35, Jesus taught a new commandment I give to you, that you love one another just as I loved you. You are also to love one another. By all this people will know you're my disciples if you have love for one another. Okay. I packed that one up. Then in Philippians 2:3-4, Paul emphasized how we're supposed to accomplish this sort of love for one another, this oneness. He says, do nothing from selfish ambition or conceit, but in humility count others as better than yourselves. Let each of you look not only to your own interests, but to the interests of others. And James taught us this one, that those who consider themselves religious and yet do not keep a tight rein on their tongue deceive themselves and their religion is worthless. I don't know how many people that would wipe out in the church. At least in my experience, it would wipe out a lot of them, myself included. So I loaded these passages up into my mind to take to church where I expected to find the people who believed these teachings were true and practice them in their daily life. Surely these would be the people who truly sought God and had been transformed by these beliefs and demonstrated that constantly. They would be the pros at it. I could learn from them and grow into the Christian I envisioned I could be. And then when I encountered self-focused, judgmental people who burden themselves with little, if any, discernible concern for their fellow believers in Christ, let alone for the broader world, I began to suspect that many church people didn't know or believe the Bible at all. So the Christians I encountered failed spectacularly to meet my expectations. But that was because I brought along my own perfectionism, idealism, naivety, and unrealistic expectations for her. So as I discovered that people in the church were just regular people, and also, and I'm going to throw this in there, not in the notes, but I also remember when I became a Christian that I was young, I was in college, so I was 20. So I still had that naive expectation that adults were grown-ups. Sorry for stepping on any toes. I've been in ministry a long time. I've seen a lot of people that didn't seem to have grown at all in Christianity over many, many years, many winters, as they say in Lord of the Rings. So there was that naive expectation that the people who were 40 years older than me would be that much more mature, would have all these experiences, would have developed this, and would be my mentors, and would be the people who I could look to, and that was just not always the case. That was extremely disappointing, by the way. I'm sorry, I know that sounds very condemning, but again, remember, unrealistic expectations on my part. So as I discovered that people in church were just regular people, I was pretty disappointed. I think that's happening in a lot of these circumstances of deconversion stories too. So one of the reasons I was very unprepared to encounter deep reflection to encounter these people was that deep reflection on the problem of evil. So let me look at that real quick. The problem of evil, which we're going to encounter in our next session, we're actually going to go into this, is a theological consideration of if there's a perfectly good, all-powerful, and all-knowing God, then why is there evil in the world? In deliberation on this matter, I'm going to do this in short form now. With real consequences. And that leads us to the situation we're in. With billions of humans committing acts of evil in large and small ways every single day. I don't know how many billions upon billions of acts of evil that is and how that interacts with our world, but it's obviously destroying things, relationships, everything. And what we're experiencing is the result of consequences. The consequences such as the fallout from the behavior of fellow church-going humans. So the problem of evil is really expressing the reality of our world. This is our problem, human evil. We keep doing it over and over, no matter how far along in history we've gotten. We keep doing the same problems. If that's true, and Christian theism is true, so Christianity is true, then I can expect, be realistic, I can expect all humans to fail in some way or another. And as a result, they're going to be failing miserably at their three choices. So the result is the heart rate that I continually experience in the church. Because I see what she should be, right? Christ's teaching, how it's supposed to get along, Paul's teaching. I see what she should be, but then I see what she is. So I can expect that in the Christian theistic worldview. Human beings will use their God-given autonomy to do what's unbecoming of a person who has salvation in Christ. So what am I supposed to do about it? Do I walk away from the faith? If I do that, the problem's still going to be there with people. Why? Because if the problem of evil is really expressing the reality of God, if the problem of evil is really expressing the reality of our world, but Christianity is false, then I can still expect humans to fail miserably in their free choices. And you can see this, again, throughout human history. Only I won't have the explanatory power of Christianity to explain why this is happening. I won't have God as the standard of goodness and human evil as a deviation from that. I also won't have an answer to it. Rather, I'd be in a situation of, well, I don't really prefer the evil that's going on, but I'm not aptly able to define evil or to really say that it's wrong. Okay? The problem with evil is not solved by walking away from Christianity. It remains. And people are still going to do all these things, and there's no answer to it. So this is what fascinates me about what Jesus is doing. First, he goes to the cross because evil is a real thing. Second, not only is evil real, but it's actually not what God wants for his creation. That matches my experience in life. Evil's real, there's real acts of evil going on, and it's not the way things should be. And that makes sense. That matches my experience. Third, Jesus rises from the dead. He reverses the ultimate end of all evil, and through his work, he's able to offer the restoration of the way God intended for things to be. So in Christianity, there is a productive treatment of the problem of evil. It's definitive in purpose and in result. Restoring the goodness of his creation through his own sacrifice. This is important to me because how am I supposed to view the church who has hurt me to the point of giving up on them in light of this problem of evil? I told you we're going to do a lot of Luke 6, and here it is again. Love your enemies, do good to those who hate you, bless those who curse you, pray for those who abuse you, and as you wish that others would do to you, do so to them. So when church members or leaders fail to do what is right, even spectacularly, I'm supposed to do what I would want them to do to me. Okay, so now I've said this a few times. I do have to caveat this. I'm not prescribing that you allow abusers or flagrantly unrepentant people to continue to have sway over your life. Is there a time for healing and parting ways? But perhaps we could be more realistic about our engagement with the church and our engagement with our doubt, what we expect. And recognize that sometimes when we're on this journey of doubt, that we have been influenced by pain and hurt from the church as well. So perhaps we can adjust our expectations to be more realistic for the kind of world in which we live. A third attitude would be to be hopeful. So as I considered my own miserable state in the church, I had to deeply reflect on a life without Christianity. And that's one of the main issues I have with the deconversion stories I've heard in the media. I get to hear all about what they're leaving. Oh, Christianity can't be true because of X, Y, Z, P, Q, A, B's. They don't say, and then I believe atheism is true because X, Y, Z. They don't tell us what they're going to. I had to actually sit there and think about, am I atheist? Is that my worldview? Do I agree that that best explains the universe in which I live? And I had to keep in mind that one of the things that was influencing me was my childhood atheism, because that's a very formative time of your life. In fact, if you're an educator, you learn that children get their view of the world pretty much by 3. They can develop their worldview by the age of 3. So it's very formative for a child. And in that time of my life, all the way up through my teenage years, I had wonderful, warm memories of experiencing so much beauty and joy and amazement at the universe in which I live. And I experienced the goodness of deep friendships with kids who were religious as well as non-religious. Plus, I had parents who taught me a moral ethic to live by and taught me how to treat my fellow mankind. For example, my mom consistently volunteered for organizations she believed would make a difference. So I was instilled with a great sense of hope for humanity from my childhood. And that hope entailed that I could make a meaningful difference in the world, that my actions ultimately mattered. But I had no idea why I believed these things were true. I just took them for granted. I had just, in my atheism, my childhood atheism, I had just adopted these things as real or true, probably based on the way I was raised, my upbringing, my childhood, my education, my culture. So part of the process of becoming Christian was a search for understanding what was the source of all these things. How did I know these things were real? How do I ground them? I had to grapple with why I think humans even mattered at all. When I began to have doubts about what I believed, those warm memories of my youthful atheism, they were pushing against my church-English heart. I wanted to go back to that simpler, childlike hope that required no belief in God and no church community. But my thinking had matured to the point that I could no longer just believe in things without considering how I knew them to be true. So in searching for my answers to my doubt about faith, I had to look at why I thought humans mattered and what gave us hope outside of any Christian teachings. So I had to look at what does it mean to be human? And what are the effects of those ideas? You see, to step away from Christianity is to accept a very different view of yourself and of your fellow humans. There have been very different ways of fleshing this out, and if I'm going to limit my look to atheistic materialism, so general atheism, in which humans are just considered as a higher order of animals, or in a more sort of crude sense, a blob or collection of atoms. That's a good way to look at yourself. Thank you for getting you and your collection of atoms here today. Actually, I wouldn't say you. Thank you for getting your collection of atoms here today. What happens if you reduce humans to nothing more than animals? And there are ethicists that do this. Peter Singer is one of them, if you want to look up his works. You know, we don't charge animals with crimes for their good or bad societal behavior. The animal kingdom's not morally responsible. They don't have a moral will. For example, you're not going to say that you just watch a television show in which the animals raped and murdered. Right? You're going to say they reproduced and killed. We'd also say that their behaviors aren't morally blameworthy because these perceived moral actions are just part of the ever-evolving process of natural selection. Right? The strong survive. The weak die. The weak are killed off, the strong reproduce, and the animal kingdom advances. So what if I believe that humans, like their distant animal cousins, are not morally charged beings, but rather their societal behaviors are part of an ever-evolving process of natural selection? Now, what kinds of conclusions can I come to about ethics and morality and about the value of human life? Well, I don't have to guess. Oxford biologist Richard Dawkins has clearly stated the resultant view of humans. Come on, Richard. I know you're up there. There he is. All right. He said the universe we observe has precisely the properties we should expect. Oh, he did not. Okay. Is that me? All right. Actually, hold on. I'm gonna blank that out for just a minute. He said, in a universe of blind physical forces and genetic replication, some people are going to get hurt. Other people are going to get lucky, and you won't find any rhyme or reason in it, nor any justice. Then he said, nothing. Nothing. There it is. Richard's being a little sassy. All right. He says, the universe we observe has precisely the properties we should expect if there is at bottom no design, no purpose, no evil, no good, nothing but blind, pitiless indifference. DNA neither knows nor cares, DNA just is, and we dance to its music. Okay, so, though Richard is not a philosopher, he is a biologist, he's outworking his view from biology into ethics, into what it means to be human. This is what he's come up with. It actually mirrors Bertrand Russell, who was the great atheist philosopher of the 20th century. Okay, so what does this mean for us? We're going to flesh his statement out. That means, first of all, he says there's no rhyme or reason to the universe. At base, it's chance. No rhyme or reason to anything that happens. It's chance. There's no justice either. So think about what this means for our current culture. All this indignation we feel at wrongdoing, or even Dawkins' own indignation at religion, is just delusional. So all this new atheist attacks on religion. Why are you attacking it? It's just the way things are, right? DNA. Right? We just dance to its music. Rather, everything we see is just what we should expect, with no good nor evil. If there's nothing but blind impersonal processes. And if there's nothing but pitiless indifference. Think about what pitiless indifference means. See, blind impersonal processes such as natural selection have no ability to care, they have no knowledge, right? They're just random mutation in accordance with environmental factors. So if you take all of that, take those ideas and apply them now to what you think of as a theory of ethics, good and evil. What is good, what is evil? Apply it to what it means to be human. As a theory of ethics, the result is humans can't do anything other than what's found in their programming. Okay? So humans, whatever's happening in a human, they're just doing what they're programmed to do. It's all back to the DNA, and there's no rhyme or reason to it. There's no evil, no good. Okay, well, that amounts to no ultimate responsibility and no real choices. Let's apply it to what it means to be human, so we're going to broaden it out. Again, there's no rhyme or reason to humanity. There's no ultimate responsibility. You don't have real choices. There's no real consequence to what you do. There's no way to infuse life with any meaning or ultimate meaning or value. You can get some relative significance, but no ultimate meaning or value. While we experience the feeling of relative significance to our lives, that feeling, I describe it as sort of like a magical spell that DNA has put us under. There's no such thing as ultimate meaning and value to life in a universe void of good, evil, purpose, design, intentionality, and will. But there's something more deeply disturbing about Dawkins' view. He just doesn't go far enough. Let's keep going, Dawkins. It betrays a hopelessness. He's saying this world is the way it is, and we should expect it to be this way. So when we look at the problem of evil, and we talk about all the instances of evil in the world, remember, this world is just the way it is and the way we should expect it to be. He says that some of us they will get hurt, and others are just lucky. If that's true, that means our defects are hardwired in our DNA, and there's no way to escape it. There's no redemption, there's no forgiveness, there's no second chances. In fact, Julian Baggini of The Guardian says our lives can go horribly wrong in ways that can never be put right. That's just the way it is. And yet, take it further. I love going all the way out with this stuff. Take it further, and yet we have minds to think about these things for decades. For decades. That's the angst of a purposeless universe. We are stuck here. We humans get stuck here with the randomly evolved ability to think about meaning, purpose, and value in a universe in which at base there is none. There's none to be found. So we're here, we've evolved to a point where we're thinking there's a way things should be. A right and wrong in a universe in which there is no right and wrong. We live our lives in a delusion of thought and emotion, and then with a cruel sense of indifference, the physical forces of the universe cause our death. place it in a more reductivist or crude sense, the collection of atoms organized in such a way to produce the result mass of matter I call me, ultimately and fundamentally changes to where it's as if I never existed. What does that view offer of a means of hope in the face of the horrors of the world in which we live? What does that view offer in our disgust at human rights violations? The marginalization of other people, dehumanizing people, genocide, famine. Not much, really. It undergirds hopelessness because hope in this philosophical stew is an illusion. Just like everything else that isn't made of just, everything else that's not material matter is not real in this view. So hope isn't real. With something like wishful thinking, we use the word such as hope as part of our language, but it doesn't actually match anything in reality. Right? It's similar to the use of the word unicorn, which I love. It's just something we've made up. What you are and the way you are is just how things are. There's nothing good or bad, nor better or worse. Whatever has been done, and whatever happens to you, and there's nothing else to say. So, considering all of that, am I ready to step away from a grounding for the value and meaning of human life? Do I really believe my hope for humanity is wishful thinking? See, I can't have it both ways. I cannot walk away from Christianity and retain the Christian philosophical framework. Can't do that. The framework that says that humans are made in the image of God with the real ability to make free choices that have real consequence and that our lives have real meaning. That we aren't just deterministic machines, slaves to our material matter in a universe void of meaning and purpose. I can't walk away from the framework that says that something is wrong in the world isn't the way it's supposed to be, nor the way it was originally. And just those few ideas right there from within the Christian story begin to build a foundation for hope. And I say hope because if this world hasn't always been this way, or it isn't just the way things have to be, then there's hope that it won't always be this way. And that there's really a justice in the world and it has an answer. That there really is meaning to human lives. There's a grounding to that. And that there really is joy and love in the world. So our three attitudes. There we go. To be skeptical, be realistic, and be hopeful as you pursue thoughts about how do I know what I know. And let me just conclude with, so my experiences in the church over time caused me to not only doubt my belief in God, but to desire to walk away from the church. So I remember talking to my husband in one conversation, and I said, if we ever get to a healthy church situation, I don't know if I'll know what to do. I won't know what to do. And he asked me, what do I mean? And I said, well, I've lived so long in a defensive posture against the church that I really don't know how to trust the people who might actually be trustworthy. I don't know what it would take for me to trust again, specifically people in the church. I don't even know if I would want to trust anyone anymore. Further, I didn't know if I wanted my doubts answered in such a way as to point me back to belief in God. Because that meant I couldn't ultimately be free of the church. And I was devastatingly heartbroken by her. So I had to consider not only the answers to my intellectual questions, but I had to take into serious consideration my attitude. Which is why we talked about the three attitudes. Was I skeptical, or had I become a cynic, where nothing would satisfy me? Was I realistic, or were my expectations unrealistic? And was I still hopeful, and if so, why? Where was I getting that from? The answers I found, not only to my questions, but also about my attitude, provided me a space to enter back into fellowship with the church. And now the way I see things is I see an indescribable beauty alongside the destruction of a raging evil in each human being. And that's because the reality of the world in which I live. Right? The redemption of Jesus has broken into the world with the problem of evil. Right now, they're coexisting, aren't they? So we'll continue to have all the same problems as everyone else because we're humans. And though this is the way things are supposed to be, this is not the way things will always be. There's hope, there's redemption, there's forgiveness. And it's these things that help me to understand my faith. I took a lot more time on that one. Yes, sir.
I would absolutely agree that an unexamined faith is not worth having.
Yeah.
The challenge is, as a pastor, how do I help people develop criteria for where they find the answers to that? Because there's such a, obviously online, there's a lot of garbage, there's a lot of unreliable information out there.
Yeah.
What's the criteria? How do you help them to find the right stuff?
Oh, there's so much good material that's available now in Apologetics. So you guys have had some of these people, so I'll just remind you of who they are. Like Standard Reason Ministries, great place to go to find reliable biblical teaching that's also very thoughtful about apologetics and how we know what we know. So Standard Reason is a great place to go. BeThinking.org. I don't know if you guys are familiar with them. They're out of Europe, but BeThinking.org. You type in what you're looking for. I'm thinking on meaning to human life, and then all of a sudden it'll pop up with audio, video, and articles, and they'll be in beginner, intermediate, and advanced. There's labels, so that you can start wherever you're at. So those are good places to go. Criteria. I would be thinking about, that's deep reflection on yourself as a person. So when is enough enough? And for some of us, it's never enough. Right? So look at our consumerist mentality in America. We always have to have the next thing. We always have to have the next iPhone. We always have to have well, transfer. Think about how that's affecting your view of Christ and of faith. If it's never good enough, then how is it affecting what you believe about God? So I would say you need to do some deep study on the nature of God and in Christian theology. And I'll talk a little bit about that in the last session. But I think Christians need to seriously spend time knowing their faith. Because when I'm hearing people walk away from faith, when they describe it to me, they say, oh, I don't believe in that either. Okay, so we have a place we can start at. We have common ground. That's not the God that I worship. I don't think that God's worthy of worship. So I am finding that a lot of people don't deeply understand their own beliefs. And so, when they say, hey, I can't believe in this, well, it's like, what is it you believe? To help them understand I would say part of it is helping them understand what they think about Christianity. That's a good place to start as well. And then keeping that cynicism in check. And then we're talking apologetics here, and I've introduced a little part of apologetics that may be different for some of you. I've included sort of like the how this affects your life. But I never underestimated praying. I didn't stop praying through all of this. Because if God is real, and there is a spiritual realm, which I think a lot of Christians forget about the spiritual realm, that if you believe in God, then there's a spiritual realm that can be effective in your life, right? You can tap into that power of the Holy Spirit. There's the immaterial realm. So acknowledging that exists and what is that doing and how is that affecting me is very important. So, and getting off of social media and getting off of the news so that you can deeply study your faith apart from your culture is very important. Because you're being fed a lot of false knowledge. You're being fed a lot of false knowledge. And from all angles. So you need to pull away from that for a time. Does that answer it at all?
Thank you.
Yeah, I'll take one more and then I want to let you guys have a break.
Have you ever heard of the belief curriculum for the entire church? It's by Randy Forsay, who is now the pastor of what used to be Maxton Adams Church. It is an amazing curriculum that can can be used from nursery up to adults. And I'm finding that it really does take me back to the basics. We don't assume that just because people are in the church, that they can articulate what they believe.
Yeah.
That's his name.
Yeah, so I don't know, I'm not familiar with that curriculum, maybe my husband's looking it up. Yeah, like you said, yeah, okay. Yeah, just taking your church through basic theology. There's one church in Houston that I was working with, and they do theology, then they do like a counseling, so they're tending to the life of the believer and where they're at. And then they would move into apologetics, and then they would start over again. And they go back to theology, counseling, apologetics, yeah.
They actually have a little booklet that helps Christians to go through to determine what they're limited in and where the book that they grow in. And so you can actually determine, okay, where are my weaknesses? So yeah, pretty fascinating.
Yeah, I do want to say, just kind of as a side note to that, apologetics is really good stuff. I believe it helps you grow confident in your faith. But if your life is a wreck and it's falling apart, you can't just boo-boo bandage it with, apologetics. It's not going to fix everything for you. So you do need to attend to what it is that's happening in your life and what's causing these issues. Whereas you saw apologetics can come alongside and help you greatly with that. But you do need more of a holistic development. So, all right.
Okay, let's be back at 11:15 to get started with the next session.
Sorry.
Hey. You got it? It's a nice piece of machinery, isn't it? I love that. That was almost enough to make me upgrade. It was just to get that green. Yeah, I love that green. It was very fast. The camera was like the best camera made. Yeah.
So that's a stainless steel.
I'll definitely get a case for it too. I have to say I'm a big fan of the Apple leather cases. They're pretty light, but they're pretty durable. I've dropped mine.
I've got a cheap, clear one.
Alice and Rick's been still screen protectors too. I think they stopped making them, honestly. They haven't had one for a while. Yeah.
Picturing them like doing work and then somebody wanting to put something on, it didn't matter where they were.
Yeah. There you go. So that's awesome.
Maybe we'll get a recommendation for that for work.
Yeah, I never thought about that too, but there are a lot of little individual places you can sit and do that. Well, there you go. Glad I could help. I was going to say, don't ever ask me any plans.
Yeah, just let me know
Let me
too.
know.
Hold up the flex. Oh, I know, mine's the same way. The other one I tried, I always, yeah. So much faster. Speed. I was not a my desktop I had to do it. I went to the app store and I pulled everything off back. But I had to go re-enter all the passwords and all that stuff. I'm not sure why it wouldn't say what it is, but it's over the it's pretty good. Yeah. What was the That's right. Really? So every time I use every time I do a task force, yeah. Wow. Say it over. Right. Wow. Yeah. Yeah. Right. And we'll have one. Right. So just write in one thing, hit it, and go. It takes time to set it up. Yeah, she was a frequent flyer, and her kid kind of remembered this. Yeah. Oh, GRAFTS, and it is a subscription. Yeah. It's just, I wanted to upgrade. It's not money. There's a little bit of a learning curve on it if you've never used it. I just tell you, it's not real graphically. It also does something from like you can do. I'm trying to be succeeding. Do this and you haven't asked for that. All right. And what it does, listing stuff together. It's just sweet. It's just really neat.
Okay, let's go ahead and get started.
I mean, I'm not bad, I can tell. Yeah, all right, very good. Okay, so before we move into the last session of the morning, I want to make known to you a few things that I have with me, the books, Why I Still Believe, which goes back to some of the stuff we've heard this morning, my personal stories, the trouble that I had in church, and then how apologetics played into that. Plus, you get a bunch of silly stories about my family, because each chapter usually starts out with something going on with us. And then I have these sign-up sheets, which I'm going to hand to my husband here when he comes up and grabs them, and we put them back on the table with the books. And one is that Houston Baptist University, that's this one. We have a fully online apologetics degree program. And so if you're interested in going further into apologetics, like you're like, I love this stuff, I'd love to get a master's in it, well, you've got that, we can contact you, so if you want some information, that's the sheet for that. If you just want to stay in touch with me and what I'm doing in my ministry, I have my own newsletter, and that's the sign up that has my name on it. So those are some of the things that are available out there. Okay, so I was teaching a session on the meaning of life, like the absurdity of life in a world void of God. When at the end of that I had finished, a group of people had come up to the stage, had come up to the stage to talk to me about questions about what they had heard. And at the very back of this group, there was one lady who was sort of hanging back from everybody else, and I could see, she caught my eye because I could see that she was red-eyed and watery-eyed, so she'd either been crying or she was really trying to hold back tears. And as everybody else left, she hung out and she came up to me and said, I didn't want to talk in front of other people, and she said, you see, I'm having doubt about my belief in God, and the reason is because the church teaches that God is good. They teach that God is good all the time. And she said, but I'm having trouble reconciling God's goodness with the fact that my son died of leukemia at 3 years old. And she said, I don't know what to do with this. Her question, her lament over experiencing great evil in her life is something that is common. This is something that's common to mankind. In fact, we've been asking this question for a couple thousand years. Here we go. The ancient Greek philosophers, they considered the same issue. They saw the great evil in the world. They saw children dying. They saw families. They saw things in the world. And they said, they tried to reconcile this idea of God with the presence of evil. And they asked things, so on your left there is, I believe it's Aristotle, boy, I'm tired. It's the School of Athens. Aristotle and Plato, Aristotle and Socrates, who can correct me. Nobody can correct me. All right, School of Athens is two of the famous Greek philosophers, and I'm so glad this is being live streamed. And then I'm getting a PhD in philosophy. Very good. So anyway, they ask, is what God wills good, or does God will something because it's good? That sounds like Plato. Another one asks, how do we know what is good, what's pious, what's righteous? For what one God loves, another God hates, and what one God hates, another God loves. Because the Greeks were dealing with that whole pantheon of different gods, right? And gods would typically be at war with each other, or they do things against each other. So we've got the Greek philosophers thinking on this. We also have a philosopher in the book of Ecclesiastes thinking about this. So the teacher in Ecclesiastes looked out at the world and found in it utter injustice and wickedness. He looked out at everything under the sun, and he considers many things in this passage. You read through it. He considers how mankind treats one another. And he saw injustice where there should be justice. And he saw much much wickedness where there should be righteousness. And he saw the oppressed, and he saw that there was none to comfort them in their oppression. That those with power abuse their position and they cause pain in the world. Those with power do as they please. They oppress and exploit for gain. In fact, the philosopher in Ecclesiastes considers that if this is all there is, if you just die and go back into the earth, he says better than the one who has lived and died and the one who is currently alive is those who have never been born. He says it's better to not exist. You look at this world full of evil. And this question has been considered, this idea of if God's good, why is there evil in the world? Has been noted as one of the greatest objections to the existence of God. In fact, William Lane Craig, Christian philosopher, said that when he ponders both the extent and depth of suffering in the world, whether due to man's inhumanity to man or natural disasters, he has to confess that he finds it hard to believe that God exists. And he said, no doubt many of you have felt the same way. See, like the lady who picked up on that from the meaning and purpose question, or meaning purpose talk, she picked up on this idea of good and evil, and why do we say this is good? When this happened with me, this great evil happened to me. This objection, as we can see from her story, will affect every single person in some way. The problem of evil is something that affects every one of us. Everyone can relate to this basic question or objection from evil based on their own experiences, because everyone experiences pain and suffering in various forms, whether it's physical, emotional, relational. So while somebody might say the problem of evil, and it seems like a purely academic pursuit, because it is a philosophical question, it's also a theological question, our own experience in life continue to thrust us into engaging this issue. We don't have the luxury of merely pontificating on this. We don't have the luxury of just playing around or intellectual jockeying, because this is going to affect us. We'll lose loved ones. We'll suffer from disease. And there'll be great horrors and great tragedies in our lifetimes, whether you've experienced them already or they have yet to come. We will suffer in this life. So this is an objection that is common and can be discussed with everyone, because everyone will suffer at some point. The hard thing about the problem of evil is, how do you discuss it? How do you engage it? So I'm not going to approach it from purely a philosophical standpoint. I'm going to talk about it with you so that you have a way of engaging it with people with experience. Okay, so that's the encountering the problem of evil in everyday conversation. So we'll look at 3 steps that we can take. As you can see, I like 3s. And if they rhyme, that's even better. But so we're going to refine, define, and outline. Okay, that's going to be our steps in handling the problem of evil. All right, so the first thing we want to do is refine the objection. We start with this step because this is a tricky objection. It can take many forms. So if somebody actually knows the problem of evil, they might actually just say to you, if God's good, why is there evil in the world? If Christians say God is good all the time, God is good, so now explain that, and then they'll tell you some instance of evil. Okay, so why, or they'll just say there's evil at all. The fact that there's evil at all. They might, like the lady who came up to me, say, how can I believe in God when blank, whatever happened to me? So whatever it is, fill in the blank. Or they might just say, there's too much pain and suffering in the world. I've had this objection made to me. Like, the force of the argument for evil resides in how much pain and suffering there is in the world. So people might bring it up in various ways. And it's a difficult thing to deal with, because this issue, because it usually comes at you very emotionally driven. Like, it's a very emotionally driven argument. I don't find, unless I get into debate with somebody online or something like that, or somebody who's a philosopher or whatever, I don't typically find the average person just wondering about the problem of evil. Like, well, how do we know this? What I find is that they experience something and then they want you to respond to that. Okay, so they have some kind of experience, either they're watching the news or something happened in their life, so they want an answer for that. That's typically how it comes at you. And so when something comes at you and it's so emotionally driven, it can really cause you to get intimidated. It can be an intimidation factor. Intimidated in the sense that you want to do something well, like you really want to help them, or you don't want to say something wrong, or you don't want to hurt them further. So this could be something that's a little bit intimidating to handle. So that's why we want to refine the objection. So what we mean by that is a productive conversation on this. That's the goal. We want to get a digestible or understandable form of the argument that they have against God. So what I mean by that is something that you understand. In refining the argument, we want to make it so that you understand what they're asking. We're working towards developing an environment in which both parties can add to the conversation in meaningful ways. So one of the first things we do, you'll hear me use this over and over throughout my talks, is you ask questions for clarification. That's one of the first things you can do. You've had Greg Copel here, so you know one of the questions that I use a lot, which is, what do you mean by that? Can you help me understand that? And can you explain X to me? Asking questions for clarification. Okay, now before we keep going with that idea, the lady who came up to me and said, I can't believe, or I'm having trouble believing God's good, but my son died of leukemia at 3 years old. I am not going to say, what do you mean by that?
Yeah.
That's inappropriate, right? That's totally inappropriate. So what I did ask her was a clarifying question, just a little bit. They said, what do you mean by that? That was a little bit changed to be more pastoral in its intent, which is, well, what are you looking for? Do you need a hug or do you need answers? And she told me, I think I need a little bit of both. I said, all right, I'm good for both, so we can do that. But we don't want to just barrel ahead with somebody who's grieving, right? And go into philosophical or theological responding when what they need is a hug. Or they just need you to be quiet and practice the ministry of presence and listen to their lament. Because I have found sometimes when I just listen to people, they start with questioning God and they end back with trusting God. And that was all just me sitting there listening to them go through it. Okay, so sometimes they're just having that grief and they need me to listen. So we ask questions for clarification, not just to be able to argue. Sometimes it's just to be able to figure out where they're at so that you know if this is an appropriate response. Should I be responding theologically, philosophically? Should I be responding pastorally? Okay, with ministry of presence or listening. So asking questions for clarification. She gave me permission to ask. So I asked her to explain things like, well, where are you getting the idea from that this was evil, that your son died at 3? Why do you think it was an evil that happened? And I have her try to explain that to me. And I know that sounds harsh, but again, remember, permission given to go that direction. Okay, so she tried to work through why she thought that was an instance of evil. But ask questions for clarification. What I was looking for was some common ground. And in this instance, I'm looking for how she defines evil. So how she knows that somebody dying at 3 years old is not the way things are supposed to be. So I'm looking for that. How do you know that that's the way, that's wrong? How do you know that's wrong? Okay. Then what I do is, after I ask her 2 questions for clarification, what do you mean by that? Can you help me understand this? Then what I want to do is I want to search for some common ground. What are some of the answers she's giving me where I feel comfortable responding to that? Some common ground. Like if she said, which she did, well, I don't think the world's supposed to be this way. Yes, I agree with you. And you guys who have been here through my earlier talk, if you remember, there's a Christian philosophical framework for that. That this isn't the way the world's supposed to be. So yes, I agree with you. Okay? But I'm going to build upon the Christian framework for that. So I want to try to find some common ground where we can both discuss, well, this world isn't supposed to be this way. Why not? Why is the world not supposed to be this way? What is it supposed to look like? There's some common ground to discuss. But I want to find that common ground because what I've found with people is that when they feel comfortable with it, like subject matter, when there's some commonality, they will actually talk to me. But if I just start laying down a bunch of philosophical jargon or Christianese on them, they feel like they're being lectured at. Kind of like you right now. They feel like they're being lectured at, so they may not engage me. They may just they may put up with me if I'm done with my spiel, and then they just go on. And I don't want that to happen, so I want to find common ground we both add to the conversation. I'm also refining the objection because I want to avoid defensive posturing. If they get into a mode where they feel like you're attacking them or that you're not trying to understand them, then they may go into a mode of just protecting their emotions. And if somebody gets into that mode, they're not thinking on the issues you're talking about. They're not going to be able to look at the issues intellectually because they are going to look at the issues from protection of that emotional response. Okay? They don't want you to hurt them. So we're trying to avoid a defensive posturing for them, but also for you. Because if they come back at you and they say something really strong against Christianity, you might go into defensive posturing. It's to defend yourself. And then you're not thinking through how you can best help them. So we're asking for clarification to avoid defensive posturing on both sides. And we're also asking questions to discover the reasoning behind the objection. Because we don't know where they're coming from. Suppose that lady hadn't shared with me what had happened. What if she just said, I can't believe God's good when there's evil in the world? And I just start barreling ahead, right? Her son died of 3 years old. What if I hadn't known that? And I just start marching forward. I need to get clarification so I can understand the direction to take this conversation on evil. So that I also can get permission to go into the arguments for evil as well. It's important to clarify because not only do you need to understand where they're coming from, you need to help them understand where they're coming from. Because what I have found is that most people that I talk to don't understand their own arguments. They don't understand their assumptions. Why is that? Because we're living in a society that entertains themselves 24/7 rather than think some hard things. Because we have access to so much entertainment. I mentioned it in my last talk. I mean, immediately we can distract ourselves with a really cute meme of a dog or something. Like immediately. And then we don't have to deal with the evil in the world. Right? Because we have access to all of this entertainment. So what we want to do is we want to help people think. And we want to free people to think about the issue. And this is going to be a hard one to do that because because the problem of evil is so emotionally wrought, they might just wall up into defensiveness. So we need to ask questions, including the question of permission. Do you need a hug or do you want answers? Okay, so we refine the question, put it into a form that you guys can both talk about. Well, what do you mean by this? What are you talking about when you say evil, and how do you know that? Many times the terms that we're using cause the problems in our communication. So terms can actually be used ambiguously without a person knowing that they're doing so. So in this case, when she was using good and evil, I want to find out what she means by good and evil. So that's my next step, is define the term. What is evil? There we go. Define the term. What do we mean when we're saying evil? A lot of people use this. A lot of people who don't believe in God use words that are charged with good and evil, like injustice, justice, right, wrong, that's not fair. That's misogynistic, that's sexist, that's this. But these are all phrases that are for racist. Those are all charged with this idea of good and evil. There's a way things should be and the way things should be. There's a good way, there's an evil way. So we want to help people discover, what do you mean by evil? Where are you getting this from? Okay, so that's our goal. Defining the term evil. Because the objection from evil assumes the existence of evil. kind of real thing, whatever it is. Now remember, if you're going, what? Remember what Dawkins said, the universe just is the way it is. There is at base no good or evil. Okay? So if you're using this objection, look at all the evil in the world, I can't believe in God, you got a problem. Because you're using evil as if it's real, even though the atheistic worldview doesn't include that. Okay? So if a person objects to the existence of God based in evil, then they have some belief that evil has a form of existence. It's real in some way. Okay, I'm going to give you a silly example. So if you come to me and you say, Mary Jo, I've got the best diet ever. It's called the Hershey diet. I just eat chocolate all day and every day. And the chocolate, I feel so great. I have more energy than ever before. I'm losing weight. It's amazing. And I say, wait a second. Okay, I have an objection to your diet. And the objection is from the amount of refined sugar in your diet. In order to make that objection, refined sugar has to be real, right? It has to be a real thing. Otherwise, what am I saying? So in this similar sense, not the same way, the analogy will break down, but in a similar sense, when I have somebody telling me that they're objecting to God based on evil, then I'm like, well, you actually believe in evil then. Thanks. That wasn't a good word. Okay, so what I need to do is I need to discover what you're basing that in. So as philosopher Douglas Rothheis says, to make the objection to God on the basis of the presence of evil, a person has to sufficiently explain the existence and nature of evil. Now, are you seeing why I can't just barrel forward with a lady with her kid? Right? Because this is like, we're now into philosophy. And I don't want to just go there if she's not ready to go there. Plus, you may probably, if you start talking like this may be the first time anybody has ever had you talk to them, or anybody talk to them in this way. Because who sits around, like I said, who sits around and talks about the nature of good and evil? I can tell you as an atheist, I wasn't doing that. I just assumed it. Never talked about where it came from. I assumed it probably because I live in a culture that has a Judeo-Christian ethic at its basis. So I didn't know that, just used it and assumed it. Okay, so at this point, you made it this far with somebody, like, hey, you need to tell me where you're getting evil from. People might get a little bit frustrated. So I would say, would you be willing to discuss the definition with me? Are you willing to go to the next step? And I've had people say yes. I've had one person kind of sneakily say no. But usually it's a yes. All right, I'm going to try to advance this with some misbehaving tester. Okay, there we go. So I'm going to suggest for us to understand what is evil. To understand what's evil, we have to know what's good. St. Augustine said it this way, as you can see on the screen, there can be no evil where there's no good. And this is because evil is not a thing in of itself. Evil is a lack of something that should be there. Evil is a privation of something. So the privation of the good thing that's supposed to be there. So good relationship, good chair, good whatever. It's a lack of good. Ken Samples discusses evil as having a parasitic relationship to good. As a parasitic relationship. They are, the two ideas, good and evil, are inextricably tied to each other. So here's an aside, and I hope it doesn't go confusing, but here's our current culture and their weirdness. They will say, you're bigoted, that's wrong, that's hateful. And then you say, oh, well, what's good? Well, whatever anybody chooses. What? If you absolutely know these things are wrong, you're comparing it to something. This is the odd age in which we live, right? They want things to be absolutely wrong, but nobody wants anything to be absolutely right. Guess what? Can't have it both ways. That's what philosophers have been studying for years. All right. So where we're at here is that we need, first of all, we need to offer that evil is the absence or corruption of good. But now that we say that, now that we say, well, evil is the lack of good, we need to know what is good. So we need some kind of standard for that. We need to be able to say, this is the good, and here's how I know it. Right? And this is really important because we can't make this objection that the world we're seeing is not good if we don't know what is good. We have no expectation or standard for what it should be. I'm going to say happy news because if I use good, it starts to get weird. The happy news is that we all use this kind of language all the time, that we use this language that assumes a standard of goodness, so people won't be unfamiliar with this. We'll say, anytime we say anything that has an ought or should in it, anything that implies ought or should is implying some kind of standard of goodness we're using. So we'll say things like, she died too young. So we're assuming there's a standard length of life that is good. Now, whatever that standard is, I don't know, but we're assuming it. Maybe it's 90, maybe it's 100, maybe it's never dying, I don't know, but we're assuming there's a standard there. So we have it in our language. In fact, the lady, when she was trying to work out that difference with her 3-year-old and God's goodness, she was assuming it. Right? This is not supposed to happen when there's a good God. The standard of goodness is assumed in there. So you can see that relationship. Douglas Roadhouse explains that while a person or an event may be really evil, that evil could not have existed without some prior or original good. Original good. So now we need to find a standard of goodness. So what I hear most frequently are arguments that assume that objective good exists without giving any basis for knowing anything is good at all. That's usually what I hear. We are in current need of a standard of goodness. All right. Because I was an educator, I don't like to roll over people, so at this point, I just stop and say, do you understand me? Like, are you getting it? I don't just keep going. Like, do you understand where we're at here? I'm going to check for understanding. And then I'm going to ask if they have any questions or concerns. So we keep going. Like, are you concerned about anything I've said so far? And this is where some people will start objecting to me. They'll be like, you're just going to the Christian view of God. You're just going to, like, Christianity. Yes, I'm a Christian. Yes. You get a gold star. So, yeah, that's where I'm going. But I've had a few people say, yeah, you're just going to tell me about Christianity. Well, I mean, yeah. Is it okay if we keep going? Do you want to stop here and discuss another standard for goodness? Do you want to stop and discuss something else? But then, if they do object, we say, well, okay, even if they don't object, they say, sure, let's keep going. Where do you define the standard of goodness? What does that look like? That's what I want to go to next. Where are we finding the standard of goodness? Help me. So some questions you might ask are that one, where do you find the standard of goodness? How do you establish something as actually good? Right? Therefore, then as actually evil. So that's your objection. And then do you believe there's actually a standard to be discovered, or do you think there's no standard? These are some of the questions I would play around with, and then variations of them. If you get this far, I will be so amazed. I've gotten this far with some people, but you have to really gently guide them there, and they have to be willing to go with you. Because this is tough. Now you're asking them to think philosophically. Right? And as I don't know if you know, but the universities have been taking logic out, they've been taking philosophy out of required courses. So we're no longer teaching people how to think. Now we're just teaching them what to think. So they're not good at thinking through things like this, and they don't consider it on their own. So that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to help them think through this. So if a person comes back with, well, here's how you find the standard, and it's like, I don't know, what they might give you an evolutionary theory, they might give you something else. Then it's time for you to do homework on that. Say, where can I go and find that, and then work with them on that. Okay? So if they come up with something, then go look it up and say, is that actually a standard? Because a standard means an unchanging, consistent thing or standard, so that everybody has the potential to discover good, and so that we have some kind of consistent, knowable discovery of it. We don't want a standard where some group comes out with murder or rape as the highest moral good, right? We gotta have a standard that doesn't have something like that. What if they have no idea? I don't know how to establish anything is good or evil. Okay, then I'm gonna say, very gently, and I won't use this word, I'll say it a different way here in a second, but this is being intellectually lazy. So you're making the argument from evil. You get an objection from evil, but you have no way of knowing anything's good or evil. You don't know how to get there. That's being intellectually lazy. So I might say it more gently, like, this seems to be a tremendously important issue to investigate. You seem to live like you believe in good and evil. You also don't seem to be like the kind of person that wants to be deceived or just delusional. You don't want to just believe things that aren't so. So this appears like we need to do some work here. And then I would suggest a book or a reading or something. Go through the argument with them. Okay, if they believe there's no standard at all, then there's no objection from evil. Right? There's no standard of good. This is a universe void of good and evil. Okay, there's no objection then. So in the atheistic worldview, you have to accept that this is the way the world is. And what I find interesting is that if you go back to the 1800s philosophers and the early 1900s, they're not shy about that. They're like, yeah, create your own meaning, nihilism. They're not shy about saying, yeah, growing up means acknowledging that the universe has no purpose and your life has no meaning. Deal with it. They were very Freud, come on. This new atheism that's like, hey, everything's great. Your life is wonderful, but there's no meaning, purpose, or value, or anything to yours. Just don't look over here. You know, the Wizard of Oz. Don't look behind the curtain. Keep it right here. And that, I mean, I'm not making that up. Richard Dawkins actually helped support a campaign in England where they had these bus ads that said there's probably no God. Now stop worrying and enjoy your life. What? Just be original. Just live willy-nilly. It's a fairy tale. So if there's no standard, there's no objection from evil. Furthermore, if you say there's no standard, again, you gotta realize all that means for your worldview. Right? All the stuff you have an aversion to, murder, genocide, famine, rape, anything else you want to throw in there, there's nothing wrong with that. It's just the way things are. Okay, now that's a harsh reality. And if you're talking to somebody like I was, somebody who's grieving, that's really not profitable to use at that moment, right? It's a very harsh reality. I did use it one time. I was talking to a Muslim guy that's trying to work through his view of God, and he actually said, my trouble with Allah is that he seems deterministic. So there's like nothing that happens that he didn't will. I said, right, so if your sister were raped, then that was just the way things are, because Allah's will. Right? He actually willed it. In that case, it might be good. So, and he goes, yeah, that's troublesome. Said, yeah, that is troublesome. Right? So we need to work through that. So in that case, it was profitable. In her case, maybe not so much profitable, right? Really gender. Okay, so then I would ask, can I tell you why I believe Christianity offers that standard of goodness, or this objective reference point for good, an objective reference point, and why it further explains the presence of evil, as well as offering a solution to the problem. Look at that. Christianity gives us a standard. It tells us why these things happen, but then it also says, and now here's a response to it. And this is going to be the unique thing that Christianity has to offer in the world out of all the worldviews. So if you're wondering why Christianity, not everybody else, this is one of those reasons why. So outline your view. So one of the things I love about the problem of evil is it gets me to the gospel. It's one of the fastest ways I know to get to the gospel and to share that with people. Because they're objecting to the world shouldn't be this way. What's going on? And the Christians are like, yeah, it shouldn't. You're right. And here's why it's that way. And then they're like, well, what's the answer? And Hinduism goes, well, this world isn't real, you just need release from it. Buddhism says this world isn't real, you just need release from it. Atheism says, well, there is no good or evil, so you need to get past that. Right? Christianity comes along and says, well, actually, it's evil, it's not the way it's supposed to be, and here's a response to it. So let's do that. What is Christianity's response? Well, first of all, Christianity says that God is the standard of goodness. Now, I'm not going to go into that because I don't have time for that, but there is a lot of work on how we know that or why we say that. So you can look into that if you want. But God is our standard of goodness. Douglas Rohai says that biblical theism claims God is the source of all goodness on the basis of both God's character and his will. That separates him out from a law. A law's character is unknowable. We only know his will. In Christianity, we know God's character. He's revealing himself, who he is. And we know what he wills. Difference there. Sorry, I shouldn't throw Islam in here. Why not? Just throw it in. That's for you. That's for you. All right, so he also says this, and this is a really important thing to note as you're talking to people who don't believe in God. God's not just willing things willy-nilly. Objective moral values, according to the Bible, are not created. God's not just making them up as he goes. They're not created in the sense that the universe was created. Okay? Objective moral values have their source in God's own character. Okay, so his eternal character. The nature and the substance of a loving, just, and self-sufficient God. So we spend a lot of time in Christianity fleshing out who God is and what his attributes are. And part of the reason we do that is that you know that values are not coming out of him just willy-nilly, but they are who he is. His values reflect his character. Love, justice, and those kinds of things. They're reflecting who he is. So he does also not create moral values. These values are eternally constituent of his being. Now somebody can argue with that, but they can argue with you, but that's what Christians believe. That's what we believe about God. So to change that and to argue something else is not arguing against Christian theism. All right. So you're going to say that exact paragraph to somebody, right? I can see you doing that. All right. So Wayne Grudem in Systematic Theology says it this way. The goodness of God means that God is the final standard of good, and that all that God is and does is worthy of approval. But look how Jesus says it. Jesus takes a big theological, philosophical concept and says, no one is good but God alone. Okay, so there's the short form. I'm sorry, did you get a picture? Okay. I was moving on, somebody's taking a photo, all right. Okay, so God is the standard of goodness. Now we got to go into what happened. And as you can see on the screen, there's a lot of what happened up there. Right? There's the short form of creation, fall, and redemption, which is what you're going to talk about. This is the gospel. So creation originally was a good thing. That's Genesis 1:31. If you go back and read that, we often fail or skip over the part where God said, he looks out what he made, and he said it's very good. So what does that mean? That means that the perfect being who created the universe, who is good, looked at what he made and made a value statement. He said, this is good. Okay, so God has put a value judgment on all that he made and said it is good. So that original creation is a good thing. So what is the evil that we experience? Well, he gave us a lot of good gifts. They are good gifts. So one of those gifts is your gift of rationality. Your ability to be a free agent to act in this world and to have real consequence. It's a reflection of God's own autonomy, not the same. So that's going to be hard because you can't just, it's called anthropomorphizing, you make God like a human. But one of the ways we know God is that we have action. We're able to be free agents and do things that have consequence. So one of the problems is that we used our good gift of free will or free agency, however you want to say it, to do really bad things with it. Okay? When I look at the Garden of Eden story, one of the things that resonates with me, being analytical, is that Adam and Eve were told, here's how you interact with nature. Here's the best way to do this.
Then they had somebody else tell them something else. So Satan tells them another, well, the guy said, starts telling them something else. But then what do? They take the good gift of rationality and they use it to go away from God. They use it to say, well, God can't be right on this issue, so I'm going to do what I'm going to do. We do that. We take our rationality and we use it to support what we want to be true rather than what is. So, and I know that because I've done it personally in fights with my husband. So that's what we've done. Corruption of the good creation. We've taken our good gifts and we have used them for very, very bad things. Romans 6:23 tells us the wages of sin is death. And you probably heard that, and it sounds like Christianese to somebody, even though it's scripture. So let's put it in a modern way of saying that. The consequence of human evil is destruction or death. So when you do things that are not good, it ruins things. It ruins things. It destroys them, and it causes death. There you go. Romans 6:23. So what was God's answer to this? Did God just leave us a cosmic orphan like the deists believe, where he just set everything up, and then he's like, well, good luck? Is that what he did? That wouldn't answer the problem of evil. That wouldn't give us any hope. So, no, he doesn't just leave us. God actually enters the experience himself. He comes to earth. He suffers with us. That's insane, folks. That's insane. He came down into this mess that we created by using his good gifts. And he comes into it, and then he takes the consequence of our evil. Right, so what is he doing on the cross? We say, oh, Jesus died, he rose from the dead at Easter. We're like, yay, we get dressed up, and I wear this hat. I don't know about you. But what's happening? What's the Easter story about? We've ruined everything. Right? We can't get out of it because guess what? We're the problem. We're not the solution because the problem's not the solution. So we need something to get us out of this problem of evil. We need somebody to spring the trap. Get us out. Look at the other worldviews. What do they say about that? Most of them don't even acknowledge good and evil as real things. Okay? So what you have in Christianity is God's answer to us wrecking everything. Goes back to Genesis 1:31, in which what he said, what he made was good. I made this good. It is worthy of redemption, as I made it. He enters into it. He takes on the consequence of all our evil. And then he reverses the consequence of our evil. Right? The consequence of our evil is death. What is God doing? Putting life back where there was only death. He actually reverses the consequence of our evil. Reverses the consequence of our destruction of his good creation. That's insane. So I'm like, on Easter Sunday, I'm the one that wants to say, amen, amen. Even with my big white hat with flowers on it. I do that. I don't know why. It's one thing I have adopted from my southern culture. But that's amazing. So we actually have an example of the reversal of death, the reversal of evil in history. Right? This is the answer to the problem of evil. It's a common sense answer that we're not the ones that, since we're the ones creating the problem, we're not the ones that are going to solve it, no matter how progressive we become. That actually our progression sometimes look like regression in a lot of areas. But we're not the ones to solve it. That makes sense. Christian story agrees with that. But then what? The Christian story says, here, I'm going to solve it for you. I'm going to spring the trap for you. I'm the Savior. Right? We have all these stories about Superman, people coming from other places and helping us. In fact, last night, Godzilla saved San Francisco from two other creatures, and we could barely see it because it was so dark. But we're always looking for that Savior to spring the trap because we can't do it ourselves. And here's the profound answer is that what God made was good, and so it's worthy for him to redeem it. And so he does. Not based on your merit, on his own. Because what he made was good. So as we find out, 1 Corinthians 15, Jesus is the firstborn of the resurrection. So not only is what he's doing productive and effective, but he's also your model, he's your example. This is what's going to happen to everyone. We'll all rise from the dead. And 26 says that the last enemy, notice the language, the last enemy to be put down is death. Right? And that sort of matches our experience as well. And death is that enemy that's coming for each one of us. Even Jesus himself talks of, he weeps when his friend Lazarus dies. He's angered at the destruction of his creation. But then he says in the same story that though man die, yet shall he live. Because he knows what he's going to do. He's going to reverse the effects. So this is the Christian story. Creation, fall, and redemption. So as William Lane Craig says, at the end of the day, paradoxically, though the problem of evil is the greatest objection to the existence of God, there you go. At the end of the day, God is the only solution to the problem of evil. Yeah, great. But let's consider the opposite. If God does not exist, then we are lost without hope in a life filled with that gratuitous and unredeemed suffering. It's just the way it is. And he says God is the final answer to the problem of evil because he redeems us from evil and he takes us into the everlasting joy of an incommensurable good, which is immeasurable good, and that is fellowship with himself. He puts us back where we belong, which is in right relationship with him and his creation. So, our steps we can take in short form: refine the objection, figure out what they're saying, try to find points of communication with them. Then define in turn, what do they mean, good and evil? Where's this coming from? And then, as you are permitted, as your conversation goes on, outline your view. And there's a great place to share the gospel right there. This is what Christianity says, and it's the only answer like this. You don't find it in the other thing. Okay, so if you want to stay connected with me, that's the book that's out there, Why I Still Believe. Chapter 6 deals with debating good and evil, and some of the material we talked about here. I'm also on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. I'm really an Instagramista. I'm not really Twitterish. Facebook, I'm good too. Instagramista, I just made that up. It's like fashionista, only I don't do fashion, I do Instagram well. So you can stay connected with me there, and there you go. You can also join us at HBU for the comfort and beauty of Virginia in the master's degree. So thank you very much.
Okay, let's go ahead and take a break for lunch. We'll reconvene here at 1:30. For those of you who are not local, there are some maps out there for some local restaurants. Just go down 42 Short Woodstock, and lots of options. And we'll see you back at 1:30.